I'll wait a few minutes before a couple of people come on, before I stop talking. Hi there. Oh, here we go. It's been all this time getting ready. I don't know why I ever put a barrette in for these things, because as soon as it starts to run, I just can't stand to have anything in my head. Hi. All right. So we'll see what, whoops. Always the lighting is, I always have to fuss with it at the last minute. So, yep. Hang on. You see me? I guess it's all right now. All right. Thanks for joining me. So, I've got, oh, where's the rest of my, oh, here it is. I've got notes to get through. So, I don't know. I never know how these live streams are going to go. I have almost learned at this point to just, I plan it in the very, very loosest possible way, because the tighter I try to go to it, you know, especially in the beginning when I started to do these things, I used to have lists, and I would try to codify the information and organize it. And I know that like more of that is going to come down the road, but at least for the time that when I'm talking, whoops, like when I'm writing, it comes out in a much more linear format. And I think it's because writing is a much more linear format. But when I'm talking, it's like, it's just, it's all flow all the time. So I know that I've got all of these lists and lists and lists of topics of conversation, everything I want to talk about. And then under every time there's another issue, I draw a line under that. And so I've got pads of this that is just waiting to be waiting to be delivered in one format or another. Before I really get going, I will tell you that, oh, where is it? Hang on. Where'd it go? For some reason, yesterday, we're having a fly problem. Cancel. I'm going to start with this. Cancel in advance any negative effects that may occur from anything. Any negative thought forms, because we're manifesting so fast lately. Any negative thought forms, any negative manifestations of any kind, I'm going to cancel all of the effects of any of that, anything that may occur while I talk. Because I want to tell you that I may have to stop and swat a fly. I opened the door, and yesterday there were about 40 flies in here, and I looked all over for the source. This is not at all what I was going to talk about. I looked all over for the source. I spent the entire day just scouring the apartment. I opened the doors. I spoke to the fly oversoul, and I said, get all your people out of here, because I'm going to start to swat in 10 minutes. And I left the door open, and I have given them every opportunity to escape or stop or whatever. I left all the windows open. At any rate, there must be maggots around. I checked the fruit bowl. I checked everything. All the cages are clean. I have no idea where they're coming from. But in case, you know how sometimes they fly around and you can't if I can't get them to go elsewhere, I'm going to grab the swatter. So if it bothers any of you, I'm just telling you that in advance. Where is my swatter? I just had it. I just had it because I was using it. Hang on a minute. Sorry. Oh, well. If I have to absolutely get back up, I will. Hi, Benoit. Son of a bitch. There it is again. I might have to get up and get it. All right. Should I do that now? I think I'll do that now before I really start talking. 1 second, because I think I left it in the other room and there it landed. I've got to go get it. Sorry. Move, move, move. All dogs move. Sorry, it's very, very disorganized. For all the time I spent getting ready, the swatter, you walk away, or I'll have to put you in the room too. Because once I get going, I can't find the swatter. It's around here somewhere. Walk away. I swear I will put you in the other room and not let you out. Go away. Okay. The dogs followed me out of the bedroom. Go lay down or I will have to make you lie down someplace else. Put you in the bathroom or something. All right. So what do we got? I'm going to go. I've got all of these diagrams. Because we're at such a critical point. I know I say this all the time. It's absolutely true. I've got to keep talking about this construct, man. There's like basically a whole book that can be written about this. There were, hi, Amy. Basically, the construct is essentially the matrix, but there's a way that it was constructed, and it was constructed from the energy of the people. So it's not like there's an outside source. It was basically a way of voting for what your preference was. You know, we had to go into the planet when we first came down within the structure. The goal was to create movement and accelerated evolution, since they weren't. There was just no growth, no choice, no personal choice. So they were just humanity at that time. And this would be about when we first came down. I would say it was roughly the time of Moses. But I don't know. I'm the voice of this thing, the messenger. Yeah, I'm in the Moses lineage. And then I'm the messenger I'm the voice of the group. So I'm the one who reveals, the construct, the way it worked. I came down as Joan of Arc, and Joan of Arc was called the messenger. And the way that my guides have prepared me very long for this role at this juncture, because I'm going to be talking about it, and also delivering certain instructions as to how we get out, because there's a tendency to view the matrix construct as something that's purely negative or just a trap. And it is a trap, but it's only a trap for those who are in the third dimension. If you can get out of it, there's a way out, provided you're spiritually developed enough to see that there's a matrix, to see that there's something wrong, and want to fix it sufficiently. Because it's not enough to just wish that things would be different. You have to be strong enough to fight your way out. And I've said before hang on a minute, where's my other triangle? I'll use this. No, I'll use this. I was going to make another diagram, and I didn't. Yeah, and I have to redo the gray on this one because it needs to be denser on the bottom if it's going to be completely accurate, because it was just dense as fuck. There was an, where's the other one? I'm going to use the other one. There was an upper triangle and a lower triangle in the Star of David. I'll use this one. I should make this one bigger. There's a different ratio of light and dark. So basically one triangle of the Star of David was at the beginning was basically one that was committed to going down and wanted the density. And the other triangle wanted the light. It was a fight over light and dark, basically. The goal is to harmonize both of them and bring it into a point of balance. There's a way to explain this properly. I'm really not doing it, but the goal when we first, I first stepped into the development of the matrix at the King David lifetime. That was really the first time we had the this structure, to the best of my understanding, came down in that lifetime. Before that, it was merely an extremely dense planet, but the structure wasn't quite the same. We weren't using this structure. So really what I'm talking about is the energetic structure that has a geometry to it it does two things. Our goal was to separate the wheat from the chaff, because the planet was in such a state of density. It was in such a state of darkness and chronic imbalance toward the masculine, where all they did was fight. I mean, that's all they did was fight. And women were suppressed to such a degree, or the entire feminine force was suppressed to such a degree that it was nearly impossible to get any flow, any movement. And as a consequence, they were just repeating the same things over and over and over, because it takes you down into density. If you look at just the downward triangle, if this point of the downward facing triangle is the point of the individual, and let's say you go up to where the space you have to work within, gets larger and larger as it comes out. It gets more spacious and lighter. That's basically what it does. As you go up in dimension, you grow out of density. I meant to make another diagram because down here, down here it's very linear and structured and hard to move because it's tight. And there's a lot of bondage. The more energy you put into, the more committed, more energy you put into this working down here, it becomes more and more compressed. So what you need to do is go up toward the feminine. You know, here's the blade and there's the chalice shape. Yeah. This star is designed to rotate. So it's not like, it becomes a very difficult thing to talk about sometimes, because for one purpose or another, I will use this model of talking about the triangles, where you've got the feminine shape on the top. You know, the blade points up and the chalice points down, and it's designed to mimic genitalia. But then I've also said that this is how you get division, this way. And this is how you get unity. The two, the structure changes. But it's also, you can also go, when it's perfectly balanced, you've got this model, and there's rotation and balance in this. But then within the, so when we went into the energetic construct, we designed a construct so that we could go, in order to get in to some place that was that dense and the belief barrier was just crazy, because the conviction was so strongly masculine, there was like no room to move at all. The dominance was so heavy. The only way you could get in was to go in as a single. Why? If you have to meet your population where they are, you can pretty much figure out why you have to get in as a single, because it is the realm of the individual. And there's like no space. The compression, the belief in separation was so extreme. If everyone believes themselves to be an individual and that's what they're there to experience, the only thing you can get in there to bring a point of light is an individual figure. You know, it would, if you tried to take a team of ETs, it's not like we haven't tried. You know, you land angelics and they say, be not afraid, because the energy is so much bigger. The bandwidth differential is so extreme that usually people in a state, if you're going into a collective that is very dense, like down here, you've got a whole collective in darkness. The belief structure is such that you can't reach them. You're going to have to meet them where they are. So we had to go down with a masculine figure during the time when it was masculine dominated, because nobody would ever have listened. But that's why you started with Moses. You started with King David. The child, I was the child aspect of King David. So that's what I'm here to talk about, because my soul has this, by now, kind of a regrettable specialty. I shouldn't say regrettable. I regret it. That doesn't mean it is regrettable. That's merely my own feeling about it. Where throughout lifetimes, I've taken this particular job and I have incarnated within a particular lineage where this is our specialty. My grandfather was that way too. His name was Burne Hogarth, because he was also the warrior aspect of Joan of Arc. And as a consequence, he was born, you know, his last lifetime, he was born a Hasidic Jew and hated it, but he spent his entire life battling. His name was Burne. And Bernard Ginsberg was his name. But he changed it to Hogarth, and he started School of Visual Arts in New York City. During the Joan of Arc lifetime, his soul came in, I was in the body, and his energy stream, because we're in a harmonic that can, the same lineage, because you have spiritual lineage, you have biological DNA too. But our spiritual lineage was so aligned, basically in the same lineage completely. His energy could come into my body very easily from the top end. And when it was time for Joan of Arc, the female child, divine child with a very, very strong connection to nature, God, and the female, very nurturing. When it was time for that to go to battle during the Joan lifetime, his energy came in and it was very male dominated and very driven, and came in when it was time to bring in masculine energy toward war, because he had that skill set already. Specialty skill sets are called in as needed, but you have to be able, it has to be of a sufficient quantity. So he carried the 48 strands of DNA as well. So he had a very massive energetic presence which could come into mine and be very dominant. It was also very competitive. Mine is not competitive. I despise competition. He loved it. He just loved that shit. But it's interesting. He started School of Visual Arts. He founded School of Visual Arts in New York City. And it's one of the finest art schools in the world. It's not just art, but it's all expression. Everything having to do with expression. And self-determination, self-creativity. So he founded that, and it was funded, I don't know why, I wasn't going to talk about this, but it was funded by federal money from when the veterans came back from war. So it's very interesting the way throughout lifetimes we rebalance. There's an automatic rebalancing that goes on across many lifetimes. And very often, particularly with souls who have a specific agenda over many lifetimes, not everybody does. Some people just want experiences. And it's more a matter of individual soul growth. There are some souls, I'm one of them, who have more of an agenda for a group or more of a long-term strategy. And when we committed to coming down in the construct, we committed not only to that lifetime, but we committed to seeing this entire job through to completion, through to the ascension window, which is now, or basically like we're heading into it. Like we committed to complete a specific job, which is basically, let's see how many of these people, and let's see how big we can get the harvest, because almost nobody's going to make it. When we look, if you look at the way it was headed, I think you're going to have like, I don't know, like 150 people ascend on a planet of billions. It just wasn't looking very good. Like the harvest was just, so we keep going back. You know, there's time travel too. Time is nothing, like it doesn't even exist. Number one, not really. The experience of time exists, but it's all on a spiral. And you can leave the timeline completely and kind of see it all spread out and figure out places. This is what we've done this on the Council of Balance. The Council of Balance was a council in the 12th dimension that was designed, that was assembled at the same time that this was assembled. And the council's job was to oversee the matrix from the 12th dimension from a very neutral strategy, and to see how all of us were doing within the construct. It's not all negative. I promise you it is not all negative. The other thing that happens is that there are always two of us, because you don't have the right to direct something if you don't also have a body in it. You can't, it's really a rule. You can't require of others that they go through something that you yourself are unwilling to do. I mean, it's as above, so below, but so below, it's as above. So there's no way, that's one of the rules. We're not going to make you do something while sparing ourselves. It's cheating. It's bad vibrational hygiene. It's not fair. It doesn't promote justice. We're not going to do it. So all of the conditions that were applied were things that we endured as well. We knew what they, from the 12th dimension, we know what's going on. And then it skips a wide strata of, it's a little bit like a skyscraper. Like there's certain things, you know how sometimes if you go to a skyscraper or something in New York City or anywhere, like you might have business and maybe you live in the penthouse, but you work on the 6th floor, or there are just certain floors that you don't know anybody who lives there. It's just not, things happen there. It's not like I never go to 10th dimension, I know that the Mahatmas work a lot from that area, and I'm aware when I go up in dimension, I'm like, I passed that part on the dial because I just don't have any business there. I never stop on 7. I just never do. There are things, like there's just other stuff that's going on, but it's not my business, and I'm busy. I'm doing my own thing. But on 6, I have a lot of business. I do a lot of work on 6, and we're all preparing for 5. There has been a lot of functioning. This was something that was constructed on 6. From 6, we brought in all the people and assembled it, and but from a 6th dimensional consciousness, we only do a certain amount of managing. The actual overseeing of it is done outside of the structure on 12 by a council. We dismantle it. It's funny because the structure is still operational, but the council on 12 has already been disbanded. It's been disbanded because we're bringing things down in dimension. If you've caught my other live streams, imagine that this, within the toroidal field, let's just say that the Council of Balance is like way up here, and I need a different diagram basically, because it's kind of like if it's very, very badly out of scale. I kind of want to say that the star in the center for chest would be like the size of the earth. But basically, the Council of Balance is, but it's also not a place. So it becomes a very difficult thing to talk about because it's also not a place. It's just a vibrational frequency. On the Council of Balance, which looked like a Greek temple, actually. Greek, maybe not Greek, but it looked a lot like a temple in the sky. It actually did. It's kind of a field of, I wouldn't call it clouds because there's no atmosphere. It's just a field, but a field of light gray, very, very, very pale, mostly white. And then there's a very, very large columns with statues, seated statues that I have seen get up and move once, but I only saw them get up and move once. I moved it. I got up and everything shook and I sat back down. But most of the time there are 6 beings that are there to strategize for the dark side, and 6 that are there to strategize for the light side, but we work on behalf of one another. The joint aim, there's a joint aim, and it is actually about balance. And it's interesting too that there's 6 and 6. So you allow for change and partnership, and then obviously it makes a 12. So it's all about balancing. That's why it's called the Council of Balance. There are 2 members of the Council of Balance who have maintained an incarnation on Earth at all times. When either my twin or I are not here, there's another member that comes in, but there's always, because the way it, you can't have somebody, you can't require of that other people go through something that you yourself will not do. There's a rotation, and someone is always incarnated. At least 2 people are incarnated from the Council of Balance, and if one dies, there's another one that comes in, because it would be cheating otherwise, and we're very committed to balance. That's why it's called the Council of Balance. At any rate, where was I going with this? Yeah, so we went in with a savior figure, but the goal was not, the goal was to get all of humanity up to a certain level of spiritual development And there's a tendency to think of the Matrix as being all bad, but it's not all bad. It's also, there's a protective mechanism too, because it provides its own security system and perimeter. Think of it as that way. It's a perimeter around for those who are unable or not sufficiently developed to escape it. And it took me a while to remember that. One thing about the movie, I don't know why, I was gonna talk about disclosure in movies. I will talk a little bit about, for some reason, 9/11 pops in. You know, in the movie The Matrix, I should also say, so in the interest of full transparency, for the purposes of my lifetime, this time with the specific, very directed, very specific job that I have, there are a lot of things that I've been prevented intentionally from having anything to do with. I haven't been allowed to see it. Like I knew that about myself growing up too. Like we lived without electricity and plumbing for a really long time. We didn't have television. Then when we moved, we had electricity. We finally got television, but there was no reception. Like there were certain things that I wasn't allowed to have them in my head. And very specifically, I had a strange upbringing that by no means was it at all comfortable, but it taught it. I grew funky. There are certain things, like I'm aware of certain things in the entertainment industry, but not others. Like my education is very lopsided. And one thing I will say is that a lot of the things that most people have been exposed to, or many people take for granted, that like everybody knows this and this and this, and you'd think that I would know it since, you know, I'm an adult and I'm in the United States, but there's a whole bunch of things. Like if you were to ask me a question about, I don't know, I also had a childhood in East Hollywood, partially. And partially we were homeless on the East Coast. And my father lived in East Hollywood, in a glorious house. And when I went to visit him, I went to camp in Beverly Hills, and, you know, all my friends there, you know, their parents were designers and artists and actors in Hollywood. And I had friends, and then I was sent back to live with my mother, and slept on a bare mattress on the floor next to a bucket of pee because we didn't have plumbing. It was my whole life has been about reconciling the top and the bottom, extremes of polarization, where I was we really did like drink out of puddles, and I dug through garbage to feed my younger brother and sister. We didn't have insulation. We didn't have windows. We had poverty that was so intense, such extreme poverty, like really like third world poverty, except it was in upstate New York. And then my father was in the middle of East Hollywood. My life's been really bizarre that way. Not a hell of a lot of experience in the middle until I got married to my ex-husband. So I'm just laying that as a framework, because if people approach me with certain questions like, well, in this movie, what was the meaning of XYZ? I'll be like, well, I didn't see it. I've been very carefully, intentionally prevented from seeing certain things. Whole swaths of the middle were not anything that I experienced. But it's interesting because, so it wasn't until 2013 when I woke up and I was always awake in 3, but then I really woke up to 5 and 12, like in 2013, and suddenly remembered why I came. Like, this is you, and this is your job, and you're doing this thing where it looked like genocide, and I suddenly remembered my job. So it's been 6 years of getting ready to actually do it. And a lot of intense training, because I'm going to be talking about the matrix, how to get out of it, and also, much more importantly, because at this point, people have basically chosen where they're going. There's vibrational drift. I'll talk more about that in a second. The challenge. Let me just finish my point about 9/11. In the movie The Matrix, so my point was I haven't seen all the Matrix movies. And I think they're coming out with another one. I don't know. I really don't follow it. My guides know, my perspective is that rather than, I don't go hunting for entertainment. I'm basically led to whatever I need to see. And if something is sent to me to see, sometimes my guides will say, go look at this and this and this. And then I'll have to go find, like, what? What am I supposed to see? What's the name of it? And then I'll go find something. And then as soon as I see it, I'll be like, oh, I see why that's relevant. Perfect example is Legion. Like, I didn't know what that was. And I have a Netflix account, but I don't browse it by, like, me and being interested. I keep it because they will tell me often to go find something on Netflix because it's pertinent to whatever work I'm doing, and then I'll go and I'll see, because the entertainment industry, as I'm sure you know, has so much to do with mass consciousness. Mass consciousness is one of the things that we played around with very, very strongly in this, but it doesn't work the way a lot of people think it works. So, for example, I have seen the movie The Matrix, although I haven't seen it in a really long time. But I do remember hearing something not too long ago. Someone was talking about, you know, that piece of disclosure in the movie where I guess they have him in a room and they're looking at his passport and it says 9/11. There's an additional meaning as you go up in strata. Every single time you move up in strata, there's an additional level of meaning that you gain a more comprehensive awareness of all of basically everything. You see yet another level. So basically, if you look at the triangle if this is the densest place of the individual, this is basically isolation and, or a belief in separation, put it that way. It's not so much isolated, it's a belief in separation. When you're a third dimensional planet, you believe that you're the only life in the universe. And is that ever true? Of course not. It's absurd. Of course not. But we believe when we're a third dimensional planet, we think that we're the only life in the universe. And we're separate. We're better. Imagine that. We developed in everything. The rest of them are just all stars. It takes... So in order to get the planet's awareness to rise, we had to get past the belief barrier that was the belief barrier was so dense that it kept only seeing things one way. You know how sometimes if you believe something to be true, then you'll be confronted with something that doesn't match that, and you dismiss it, and you just keep responding the same way. Getting past the belief barrier, or through penetrating the belief barrier, has been one of the strongest challenges, probably the thing that's hardest to conquer. Because remember I said that when the only thing you really have power to change in the third dimension, your power is reduced to yourself. The job of the third dimension is to, this is where you focus on yourself, your own reaction, your own development as an individual. And the only thing you can really control, although you try to control everything, it's always so interesting. In the third dimension, the realm of the individual is where you try to, there's an emphasis on trying to control everything. You want to control everything because you really don't have any control over anything. So you get scared. So you try to control as much as possible. But really the only thing you're here to learn how to control your own self, how to be self-sovereign, how to direct yourself. And then according to the way you react, you're going to get, I've said this before, if something occurs, you have a response to it at your heart center, and then based on the way you respond, it's going to loop back around, and you're either going to get the same thing, or if you've responded appropriately and you're ready for a new lesson, like, oh, we see you got that lesson, a new, more expanded, relaxed version of something, whatever, will come back around. But if you are met with something and you clench and you react and you try to control it, then what's going to come back around is further control. And so then you're going to be met with the same thing over. And then if you still respond, it's going to increase more and more and more. Spirals amplify. Every single time something comes around, it's a slightly stronger version of itself. So if you relax and you allow yourself a certain amount of space, if you respond to something and if something comes in and it's scary, and you respond by appropriately calming yourself and you bring peace to the fear, basically. You feel the fear and you respond to it with peace. Then peace is what's created. That's your creation down here. It's going to loop back around. And then the next time it's going to, you're going to be met with a peaceful situation. You will have changed the situation by virtue of the way you responded to it. The problem that we've had in the third dimension is that there's so much within collective consciousness, is that the responses vary. And so you've got some people who are responding, and they very, very, very much want to have things go one way, and there's another side, or other sides, other vantage points that want it to do something else. So I feel like I left behind several topics. I was going to talk about 9/11. In the movie The Matrix, and then I'll go back to this. In the movie The Matrix, there has been some talk that I've heard of where they're talking about like foreshadowing, like there's kind of this idea that in the movie The Matrix, when they see his passport and it says 9/11 on it, that was for show, and they were telling us in advance, like there was a meeting that took place, and they said, let's put 9/11 in the passport. Disclosure doesn't really happen, or plotting. There's not like these, it doesn't really happen like that, but that's kind of a third dimensional idea. You're seeing it through a third dimensional lens when you look at that and come up with that conclusion, because it's kind of like it's the only thing you can imagine. But there's a much looser way that things tend to develop and fall into a form that takes that particular form based on the energetic qualities that were there. So the other interesting thing is that time works backwards and forwards also. It doesn't just go forward, it also goes backwards. So you can have an event that falls on 9/11 and have it affect the manifestation backwards. One of the biggest understandings of the third dimension is the belief that the third dimension is causal. It's not a causal realm. It's a realm where things happen, but you don't actually cause anything. Not really. It's like the mechanism by which things happen. I'm not explaining this very well. Help me out. The other thing that I wanted to point out about 9/11, number one, 9/11, the date, when the towers were hit, that day, that was supposed to be, it was originally planned to be a reset of the financial system. So 9 is for completion. Anytime you see an 11, pay attention to what's around it. So it was a completion. The 9 is for completion, right? On the scale of digits, 9 means completion, an end. And 11 is the gateway. So on 9/11, that day, which interestingly enough, I was supposed to be in Tribeca that day. I was scheduled to be in Tribeca that day. And instead, I was offered a last-minute trip. They asked me if I wanted to go rescue 5 terriers from the south. And they said, can you come pick them up on this day? So I rescheduled. But I was originally going to be in Tribeca. But it's interesting that it was Tribeca. So tri means 3. And it's in the financial district. So there was originally supposed to be a financial reset that was going to happen on that date. And this is a spiritual war. It's a spiritual war for this planet. So instead of a manifestation of the completion of the 11 gateway, they took the 11 gateway, the Twin Towers, which are basically an 11. World Trade Center. That crashed down instead, and it was basically a massive delaying tactic that the dark side used to try to milk as much darkness out of as much fear, as much terror, to keep us trapped longer, because there was supposed to be a rebalancing that was going to take place on that day. And instead, we have additional time, it was basically a delay, a massive, massive delay. And here we are, what, I don't know, later, years later. And we still have not received the financial reset that we were waiting for. Is it coming? Yeah. There's I will say, you know what, hang on a minute, I'm thinking. I have noticed, how are we doing on time? It's 47:51. I've noticed recently that a lot of my information has been, I've been getting a lot of interference. A lot of these streams have been cut short. And I've been, a lot of us have been very heavily attacked lately, myself included. I rang, for those of you who missed it at the beginning, I'll do it again. I'm setting the intention that anything I say, I'm clearing any negative effects, that any negative energy or any negative manifestation that may arrive, may be manifested from anything that I say. Because I'm very aware that we're stepping over the threshold into a realm where we get instant manifestation, but we have to be careful sometimes, because there's a balance that really needs to be observed and paid close attention to, because I want to be able to deliver the information cleanly, without inadvertently, accidentally recreating the same thing because I spoke it. And sometimes, you know how sometimes you want to be really, really careful with what you say, but sometimes when it's like it's already hard enough to communicate, so I'm just asking Spirit to, with making a clear intent that I'm just going to speak freely, and with the caveat that the set intention from the get-go that anything negative, I'm not adding any of my my energy in toward that, and I'm asking angels for the collective and angels for myself to automatically let this serve to go toward disclosure and no further manifestation of anything that tips down or recreates anything. My purpose is only disclosing information. Yeah. So where was I going with this? Oh, so 9/11. It's the 11 is for the gateway. So we're meeting this again, coming around again. So every single time, you know, I've said in my previous live streams that spirals amplify. Every time that's one of the reasons too, well, like 3 times a charm. Anything you do 3 times has been spiraled to the point where it now carries a certain amount of punch when you apply it. Every single time you rotate anything, the energy surrounding that increases. So 9 is a completion. It carries a considerable amount of force, energetic weight behind it because it's 3 times 3. And anytime you delay something further while years pass, we're going to get more propulsion out of it. It's going to shoot us further. And justice is going to be served. It's not like as unfair as things have gotten. Because has the imbalance been extreme? Yes. I'm not for a second going to say that it hasn't. There is an automatic rebalancing process. So I'm going to be talking more about the structure within the matrix, that when this thing divides, you're going to get a triangle that goes off in each direction. And whatever as far back as they've held us, number one, it's the same thing. I will say that way too. It is 2 sides of the same coin. So what must that mean? You need to think about it as an interplay of energetic forces and you cannot pull on just one end of a rubber band. So it seems like the dark side is winning. I understand it seems a lot like the dark side has won. That's impossible. It can appear that way. It sure as shit appears that way a lot. I've been in tons of battles like that where like, this is so unjust, it seems impossible. But you can't pull on just one end of a rubber band. It's impossible. So what must that mean? If the darkness is what's visible. The darkness is, and it becomes so dicey to talk about this sometimes, because there's also a way this is not true, because there's also darkness in energy that's not yet tangible. But so for the purposes of this discussion, I'm saying that darkness is matter, density. What we're really after is this configuration. So this is what we came in to kind of strive for. Remember when I said that there's a 3 on each point, there's an 11 gateway on each point of this thing. If this is the matrix, and each point of the Merkaba, this is a 2-dimensional model of a 3-dimensional structure. And there are 2 beings on each point. And when we started it, we went in because there was imbalance already. There was already extreme imbalance. So you go down with a savior figure who's going to go in as a single, because that was the only way you could get in. You can't go in with something that's very individuated. You had to get in as an individual because that's the only way you can reach your population. You have to meet them where they are. So we went in with to kind of meet the imbalance and begin the process of motion. You land as an individual and you say, okay, this is the savior figure. The goal, so there's an easy way to do it and then there's a harder way to do it. Either way is going to be successful. One side is going to be more extreme. The fastest way to balance this out would be to go in this direction, because you only have to, either way, you only have to move one. The movement is going to happen in a 3-to-1 ratio, because 3 is for change. That is always going to bring you motion. And then whatever direction you take it, it's going to be led by the 1, because 1 is leadership. Leadership, thought. If this side, who has the bulk of the power, uses their power appropriately, if they are wise stewards and they don't abuse their power, if they have a powerful advantage, what they will do is give some of what they have to this side. And what that would do would be to take you to a balanced 4. And then you would say, that would be a very quick way to balance it, because then you have a nice balanced structure. You've got a balance of masculine and feminine, and then you've also left space for God. So this is basically what you really want to do. Ultimately, this is going to lead you to a structure on top and a structure on bottom. So 4 is for structure, right? So you've got 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom. And then it's an exchange, an equal exchange between God and human beings. So it's partially self-determination, and it's partially that which is above you, you leave space for flow. Either direction that this thing rotates in. So basically, if we put 2 beings, so this is the way it works. It's a difficult thing to describe. If you haven't caught my last live streams, go back and listen to the rest of them. Also, if we get cut off, I'll come back. If we get cut off from this live stream, if anything happens, I'm going to keep it going. I'll come right back on. So just go back to my wall and pick it back up again. Yeah. Also, if you can, I load these up all onto my YouTube channel, The Ascension Arc. So if you go to YouTube, The Ascension Arc, please subscribe and like, because I think as soon as I can work out the technical problems that I'm having, which I've been having technical problems, and as soon as I can work that out, I'm going to move to doing them there. Yeah. Okay. So the way we work this out is that we built an energetic construct which is going to get stronger the more people add their energy into it. So it's purely elective. Because you have to respect free choice. Like, you're going to come down, you're going to try and save the planet, which is going to die anyway, so it's basically a Hail Mary. You know you're going to lose almost the entire crop. So our job on the Council Balance is to invent some strategy and say, let's see if this will work, because there ain't no way they're going to make it otherwise. So the choice as to how one of the first ways we're giving the power back, trying to give the power back to the people, is through disclosure and saying, this is the way it worked, but your choice is to how to view it. Are you going to put yourself in a negative mindset and say, the Matrix was all about oppression and they fucked us, man. They've been putting fluoride in what have they? Yes. Yes. There's been a tremendous amount of oppression. I'll get to that in a minute. There's a way that they self-imprison. We had to allow for free choice, because one of the things on the Council of Balance, and it's just a universal law, you do not have the right to tell the other side that they may not exist no matter how much you dislike them. You don't have the right. We can't, if we don't want them to annihilate us, we can't say to the dark force, well, except there's a caveat to that, because sometimes species are retired if they don't follow the rules at all. Part of the thing is that you must learn to coexist. If you're invading too much and you've been warned, there are some times when species become too dominant and they are taken out and totally removed. Like the first choice is going to be to put them in a location, to say you're relegated to this region. You can exist, but you have to stay over here. You can love yourselves, you can play by the rules of your choosing, but you can't, if you haven't learned how to play well with others, that's the only time then that you're ever actually gonna be retired as a species or really annihilated. And that's a huge argument for some other time. It really has nothing to do with us. There are sometimes species that are wiped out because it's like, you guys aren't, no. And that has actually happened recently because certain races are the wrong word, we're so aggressive and so domineering that we can't have them anymore. However, for the time being, I'm just going to talk about this. So we were trying to preserve free choice and get as many souls, beings, preserve their free choice while still allowing them movement. So the matrix was a way to get in, a way to start movement. And by virtue of vibrational choice, each being's vibrational choice, you're going to, so before you've woken up, so we had to start working on behalf of the beings. We create icons to see who gravitates toward what naturally. So we don't have to wake them up completely because they're not ready. It would create more trauma, which would create a tremendous amount of fear, which would yank them back into it would lower their vibration. We have to raise their vibration, create movement, allow for free choice, encourage the skill sets that we want. We need to encourage their imaginative faculties, encourage their sense of play. So stories really focus, they play a really big role in getting past the belief barrier, because you need to be welcomed in. If somebody is in abject denial of something, you're not going to go inflict your belief system on them, but you want them to open into something and say, okay, because you have to observe free choice. So we put stories, and you'll notice in all of these stories, like you have to meet your population where they are. So you're going to have stories that are allegorical or something that they can relate to. They're not necessarily meant to be taken literally all the time, but like the story of David and Goliath, the lifetimes that I've gone down in, there is a notably large, because I'm the messenger, that the energy that I carry is that I'm the one that tells everybody. I carry a tremendous amount of speech energy. I'm also the one who speaks for the group. I'm the one who speaks for the group. I speak for a lot of the realms that have been voiceless, that were unheard. It's just the portion of the construct that was kind of my jurisdiction. But there are many of us. We have, there's a masculine aspect, there's a feminine aspect, but then there are all sorts of these different issues and specialty beings who came in for war, who take all the warriors, and they kind of, if you're in a particular jurisdiction and you change your mind, remember how I was saying that the first creation is yourself? So you can adjust your own self over lifetimes. You create yourself and you say, basically, this is who I am. and you will pull in aspects from Isis or aspects from Mary or aspects from Joseph or aspects from anybody, any of the templates, and you decide what feels right to you. And then by virtue of your own energetic drift, you kind of align yourself with some beings more than others. And you're going to be, so whatever you put into the construct with your own energy, you get, so let's say you get picked up, I'm explaining this so badly. Let's say you're a being on Earth, and they always say to use the Joan of Arc construct. The Joan of Arc template is the one that my guides always tell me to use, I guess because it's my own personal experience, and it was also recent, fairly recent. So if you have a figure like Joan of Arc, and as I've said before, somebody very eye-catching, kind of sparks, engages the consciousness, engages the interest, gets a lot of people interested. For better or worse, you didn't have to, I mean, one thing that it's, that persona, because I've said this before, I was the only one in the body the entire time, but many energies came in to have that experience. There was one physical form, but we went down in a primary triad, Isabeau, Bavaria, and King Charles VI, who died, and then we replaced, there was a vacancy. He died of density, King Charles VI. He died earlier than we had hoped. And so we put in his son, who was a child, and we figured, well, maybe we can use him instead. Because so much planning had gone into that lifetime. We thought, okay, we'll try it this way, and we're going to see how much we can get out of it, because we really were shy on time. If you're trying to get a certain amount of development, get the people to develop sufficiently by the Ascension Gateway, they have to have a certain skill set in place. So we keep going back in time. I feel like I dropped about, I feel like I dropped a number of topics. That's going to drive me nuts. When I re-listen to this, I'm going to have to go back and say, oh, I meant to say this, I meant to say this, I meant to say this. Yeah, I already wish I had organized this differently. Anyway, we keep going back. When you leave your body, you can see what you have room to adjust. Like you can put yourself in a different location in time. This is talked about in Legion. If you want a really confusing experience, you have to kind of get out of linearity to even watch Legion. There's a lot of dark imagery. I don't usually like that kind of thing. I'm not saying to watch this because it's my taste, but if you watch that show from start to finish, it is pretty literal. It all is basically what's happening in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is where a lot of the maneuvering goes on, and it's half dark and half light, and there's a lot of vying for energy streams that happen. That's where most of it's a lot like Grand Central Station, where there's a lot of movement that goes on, a lot of cross-purposing, people changing from one thing to another. So if there's an ascension window, if this is density, as you go out, it's like cycles move. Different things move at different rates. It moves slowest here. It moves, is that really true? So there are also some planetary cycles, you know this, if you follow any kind of astrological anything. There are some cycles that only come around, it's really, really, really long. So one of the things we do in the Council of Balance is we watch when windows of opportunity come up. So if you're in density and you've got this little sliver, you know that your chance to get out of density is basically a trap. You're going to have to wait for if this red circle is rotating and you know that your window is, you're going to have to wait. You've got this little window and you got to get out during this time. And when you miss this window, you're going to have to wait for it to come out again. And then once you're in here, like there is a way to get all the way through, but you have to be fast. You have to, you know, kind of, this is what spirit guides are for, because from the position of an individual person, it's virtually impossible to keep track of all this stuff, and you couldn't do it anyway because you're in a body. And the reason you listen to your spirit guides, you pay attention, is because it is your spirit guide's job to guide you, because it's their job to keep track of your soul's progress. There is so when we say it's like there's a window of opportunity and you need to catch it while it's open, it's a little bit like if all of these are carousels that are moving at different rates. It's your spirit guide's job to get you from a place of density, say like, now's your chance. You got to, you know, take this action. When your spirit guides or when your angels come in and you get strongly prompted to do something that maybe you wouldn't normally do, or you just have an idea that comes in, you know, like go over there. It's very often because you're supposed to meet somebody, or something's coming in that's designed to maybe help you meet whoever you're supposed to meet to get you to grow. Because you're not really supposed to stay in a position. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a hard and fast rule, but you're not here to stay in your comfort zone your entire life and not experience any spiritual development. The same way our physical bodies, you know, as above, so below, our physical bodies go through physical adolescence, and you go through physical changes on your way to becoming a physical adult that can be a viable asset to society. Not saying that children aren't, but part of physical maturity is you learn to rear others, take care of others. There's a spiritual maturation process too. And the whole process of Kundalini awakening, where, you know, you learn, the energy goes up your spine and you gradually learn more and more and more, and you become fully awakened and able to be spiritually sovereign and spiritually care for other people in a manner that where you're a wise steward. So when you are confronted with an imbalance of power, from whatever area, if your energy has gone into the construct and it's basically like soup, and you get a little taste of intermingling with everybody else. Like if you follow an icon like Joan of Arc and you give that person your attention, or you give whoever it is your attention, and you add, by virtue of focusing on it, you add your energy into the soup. And there's a rotation that's intentional. There's always this rotation here. So you're going to get it. We designed it this way to heighten empathy, to accelerate the experience of empathy. We went into the construct with other beings that don't necessarily agree with us. We didn't agree with a lot of them. Like there are certain bandwidths, like a rainbow. It's just like a rainbow. Like there are certain places where like the red strata of the rainbow will not go. Usually it doesn't intermix with the green. They usually, you know, they kind of clash. They're complements, but it's like directly opposite. But in order to accelerate evolution, we made this thing where it goes around and around and around. So if you add your energy into this by virtue of your attention to any icon, you're going to gain the benefit of their stability. So let's say if I'm Joan of Arc, and let's just say that for the sake of argument, I'm green. I'm actually on about half these different points. My twin takes the other half. But there are many beings in there too. Those who identify very, very strongly, purely with me, will basically come in through my side, but their energy goes in here, and they get the benefit of my stability. My perspective, my experience will be the one that it's kind of a gateway that they go in and out. But again, it goes in and out through a 3-to-1 gateway. That's the way we established it to be a 3-to-1 gateway. The way out is going to be through equality one way or another. So it's going to heighten your experience as a soul you go in, you put your energy into this construct, and you get the benefit of everybody else's experience because you're able to partake of the wisdom of all of these beings while you're in the construct, not necessarily only a confinement system. It is a confinement system, but it's not only a confinement system. It's a confinement system for the duration of time when it served a purpose toward both sides. The dark and the light benefited equally by the matrix. So this is why it's a trap for those who haven't learned. So you need to watch out for the way you yourself are viewing it, because you are an energetic contributor with your mindset. If you are of the mindset that, like, if you're awake enough to know that there is a matrix, often, understandably so, the first reaction is to get kind of pissed about it. Like, how dare they try to control us? We don't want to be controlled, etc., etc. And you find out, you know, for a while you'll find out about the rabbit hole and you'll do your research about conspiracy theories, etc. But then after, so you're going to feel a certain amount of anger or fear or what, all of these negative emotions that from the third dimension, that's where all the purging takes place. So it's appropriate. The matrix is not only something that can find everything, it's also one of the mechanisms by which the collective purge is taking place in a manner that can still get us out. Because there was no way that humanity was going to get out unless we went through a process that escalates everybody at the same time. We're trying to actually get everyone to lift to their degree that they can do it. And it's also separating the wheat from the chaff. It's separating the light from the dark. If you wake up fast and you've done your purging work, like you wake up fast, you discover there's a matrix, you go into anger and fear, and you fight for your rights, and you try to get everybody else, you say, hey, there's a matrix, I'm serious, and I'm mad about 9/11, I'm whatever you are. You get really mad, you go through, you start to clean up your portion of the darkness by feeling it and turning it into something positive. And you, as you know this, as you become more awake, you get lighter and lighter, you know, you get clarity, more and more clarity. The more of us feel darkness, because you transmute darkness by feeling it, right? It's not like you just, it appears that way from a lower level, where you just, like, you know, you ring a bell or you pray to a saint and you say, oh, make this darkness go away, and you clear the blocks. But the darkness goes someplace. It either goes someplace where it becomes somebody else's problem. It goes back, you know, you return to sender. It goes, there's a certain quantity of it. So either you're going to transmute the darkness by feeling it and using the darkness to bring your own light to it, where the darkness makes the light stronger. That's an example of feeling something and taking your pain and transmuting it into making you a more powerful force for light and good. If that's what you're doing, then you've basically chosen your own area of the matrix. If they aren't colors, if you've seen the darkness, you've had a really, you know, extremely dark experience, and you've processed it through your own experience sufficiently that now you have a very strong preference for light. Let's say you're a really, really strong light warrior and you are only going in the one direction, and you manage to go down into the depths of darkness like you're a Jesus. You take the darkest figure, the darkest experience, and you still manage to, through all the suffering, bring it back to a place of the purest light. And maybe, hopefully, if you're really, really strong, you're going to affect a lot of other people and transmute a lot of darkness as you go. Or it's, you know, some variation on the theme. But basically, you're going to, if this is the soup, this is the mixture, and it's all going around and around and around, you're having a collective experience. whatever you put into the matrix is what you're going to get out. So it's basically a sorting process. You can look at the matrix and say, it is a suppressive mechanism, but it's basically a suppressive mechanism like a crib that says, if you can, we're going to put this crib on and we're going to like accelerate your development, like put you in a blender a little bit, put you in a whirly thing to see like which one of these areas do you naturally gravitate toward. Because we can't tell you to make a choice until you know you have one. And in order to get past the sleeping aspect, we allow you to think that it's, we give you a whole bunch of entertainment choices. And we say, well, where do you gravitate to when you think it's just play? When you think that it's just play. And I can choose from, because there's very little resistance to choosing entertainment, for example. Everyone chooses entertainment. You can choose to not be entertained. You could choose to wander in the woods instead of watching television. But your choices of entertainment material, that has a vibrational frequency, and you gravitate toward that for a reason. So if you're all Disney all the time, as an adult, that tells you something about a person. If you're really attracted to horror movies, or, it's so interesting that all of these, like the Avengers, I don't watch it, so I don't know, but it's like all of these superhero movies, and it's so interesting that that's now really popular. But it's just pay attention to what do you like? What do you gravitate toward? Is it largely positive, largely negative? What does it tell? Ask yourself that question. What does it tell you about your own psyche? What does it tell you about, where do you think you might fall in terms of vibrational drift? Because there's the law of attraction. Like attracts like. You're going to go into one of these areas. So if you divide this thing in half, and the sections, they're going to be divided. There's as above, so below. There's when these things divide, there's a triangle that's going to go up. There's a triangle that's going to go down. The triangle that's going to go down, it's not so much that it's a punishment, but it is what you said you wanted by virtue of all of your choices. So if you're someone who just stays in fighting and they won't give up the fight, they won't give up the fight. They're just determined they're going to fight and be accusational and find something wrong with the other person, and they're just not going to go into a place of peace. Or it's always going to be the other person that has to make the change. If you can't get yourself out of conflict, then you're in no position to be a wise steward of others and help them deal with their conflict. You can't, it's actually a safety precaution also. The matrix is also a safety precaution, because I've said this before, that when you go up in strata, you are automatically a wise steward of, you need to be a wise steward of others. This is the way God works. Do you want to, so if, I need all my diagrams. So if this is where we need to be headed, the 11, the partnership where we do everything that we can do, we do in a balanced way. We keep our balance between masculine and feminine as balanced as possible. That that's our job. The rest of it, we leave an equal portion to God. So that anything that we can't do, we leave to the strata above us. It serves a protective mechanism to not allow anybody there's a bandwidth there, there's a barrier there, because if you view caring for other people as a burden, you're in no position to be in any kind of a godlike position where other people are going to ask you for something. What you really want in any kind of a religious icon or a godlike figure is someone who actually wants to care for you, who is a wise steward of others, who wants to give as much as possible. That's why, although it's funny, every time I try to talk about this material, there's always some kind of exception that I could talk about that too. I'm talking for the purposes of this example, everyone in higher dimensions needs to be a wise steward of others. There are certain locations where it's like a dark region and they're in higher dimensions, but it's all darkness, but they care for their own group. They do, we wouldn't call it being a wise steward, but it's their own set of rules. There is a place where that happens, areas. So if this is the realm of movement, and for the purposes of when the matrix is all operational, it's a 3-to-1 ratio within every group. So if you're somebody who sees if you're someone who sees an imbalanced situation, when it comes time for you to have the power, do you care for others wisely? Do you give to the poor? Do you get, if this person has less, how do you wield your power? That's going to determine whether you go up or down. So you're going to need to pass through. The only way you can get out really is through the 11 gateway. If you take, this is the way the matrix is being dismantled. If you are in a position where you have the dominant power, you're in a position of power, and there's somebody who has less advantage than you do. If you care for them and you say you donate money sufficiently and also for the right motivation, here's the thing, like motivation really actually does matter. It's not a judgment. We need to get out of that. From the third dimension, we tend to think of all these things as being judgments, and it's not like there's an external source, although there is, like God Squad, and there are spirit guides who are watching you. That is true. But it's really less about judgment. It's much more about measuring. There's just a measurement that determines where, like if you're in this construct, when the construct collapses, you're going to go into one of these areas, and it's going to be the one that you climbed in. You're just going to get measured and you're going to go according to whatever the hell you did when you were moving. It's like, where do you match? Are you carrying this much fear? How much did you give? It is a measurement though, but it's a very precise, down to the photon measurement. So if you're in a state of perpetual conflict, fear, and self-interest where you give, but only when it's going to give you something, or if you're motivated to give somebody something so that you can look better, because what you really want is, there are only two paths really that you can take. There are variations on the theme, but you can really only go into service to others or service to self. When you're in this position, you're either in a position of where you need to be able to receive, and a lot of light workers are not in a place where they're able to receive. Many of us believed the doctrine that it was better to give than to receive, so we have a hard time receiving. That can't fly. In order to bring yourself to a place of balance, you must have mastered the ability to give and receive in equal measure. Because in the fifth dimension, especially in that financial model, in the model altogether, it's just the circulation model, whether it's money or anything else. It's all based on equality. That's why this is the place of balance. You do everything that you can do that is yours to do. You take all of the action towards serving others that is within your ability to do. Most people can do more than they think. And then everything that you genuinely can't do, while still challenging yourself to get out of your comfort zone, then you leave the rest to God. That's half God and half you. It's the new model of the cross is where you put yourself in the center instead of saying Jesus has to die there. And it's not about Jesus died for our sins and we're going to perpetually look on an image of horrendous torture and apply our own focus on that and add our own emotions. Oh my God, he died. Was it horrible? Yes. So now let's stop doing that. How much of that are you willing to pick up? How much of the world are you willing to step into? How much will you do? Put yourself into the center of that without the anguish and say, I'm committed to taking my share of it. I'm going to do everything I possibly can do. I'm going to alleviate as much suffering as I can possibly do, and everything outside my control, I'm going to pray and give that to God. And receive, it also amounts to receiving. You can't just be the giver all the time. So what usually happens, if people who tend to be more on the giving end, they will tend to give even when they only have one. They need to be in the receiving. In order to bring this back into balance, they need to receive more. So the portion of the triangle that these people usually need to do, they need to bring themselves back into alignment by receiving more. The people who are unfortunately, the people who have more tend to usually think that they also have less. I don't know why that's the case. It just seems to be that way. Give as much as you possibly can and be willing to step outside your comfort zone in order to do it. In the fifth dimension, the model is you can have as much as you will also give. So if you require $5 million because that's how big a project you actually are building, don't wait for the $5 million. But if you're committed to serving, start giving. I mean, like have yourself a foundation, but start your service work first. And say, may I have more so that I can more fully give. And then as soon as you have enough, you give and give and give and give. Keep doing it. It's actually going to bring you more in the fifth dimension. Like right in the third dimension, when there's a lack mentality, it seems as though when you give more, you have less, but it doesn't work that way in the fifth dimension. In the fifth dimension, when it's totally in balance, the more you give, the more you actually bring in. And so it's just like, the model is very much just like breathing, exactly like breathing. There is plenty of oxygen. You're always going to have enough oxygen. You're always going to have enough money. And as you do more exercise, you need more oxygen, therefore you get more oxygen. Money is the same way. If you need a bigger house because you've got a whole bunch of foster kids, then you get a bigger house. You're going to get everything you need for your well-being, and then everything else in addition that you need to fully manifest your highest service to the world. That's what you're doing in the fifth dimension. So from this position of the matrix where this creates movement, that's why the matrix is built on a 3-to-1 ratio of triangles, and on each one of these points is a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning there's a certain amount of imbalance. Depending on what they do with it, it's going to move in one of two directions. It's actually going to move it's doing all three. Here's where the movement takes place. If this side gives and balances the energy appropriate, then it's going to take appropriately, then it's going to bring it into a position of balance, and it's going to create an 11 gateway, and that's when you can get the most through. If you're somebody here where on either side, if this person gives too much and gives their power to this person, it's going to take you to a tower moment, which I've talked about before. What that's going to lead to is division. It's going to lead to cell division, because that way, every time you have a 4, you're going to get a structure. But these two are going to be divided, moved apart from one another. This is where there's a foundation in matter, foundation in the physical that's balanced, and a foundation in spirit that's also balanced. But there's a partnership between them. It's equal. If you go to here, this is where you've got a greater degree of division, and it's no longer in partnership. There's a structure, 4 is for structure. There's a structure on this side. There's a structure on that side. And you're going to get something that goes into, it's basically going to be a dark, you're going to get a dark triad and a, yeah, I'm going to go back to this model. You're going to wind up with the 3 light sides are going to break off, and the 3 heaviest points are going to break off too, and you're going to wind up with 2 triangles that are no longer connected. That's basically what's happening now with within the matrix. When the matrix comes apart, you're going to get the darkest aspects are leaving, the lightest aspects are leaving, and then you're going to get everybody else who's not yet ready is going to stay within the construct because they're still benefiting. They benefit from that system. They still have more to learn. They're not finished yet, and there's nothing wrong with that. They need more time. So that's where you're going to have like this, basically the structure. Like if you're still benefiting by the matrix, you're going to be moved to a 3rd dimensional planet to, it's like the matrix is coming down. I'm not explaining this well. It's coming down, but only after the separation is complete. Like it's not, some of us are leaving it and first to basically to establish the structure of the top. I'm not explaining this very well, am I? I'm going to get back to it with a different diagram. I think it's going to be easier. Anyway, what we're really looking for is flow, where there's a sufficient amount of structure and structure so it doesn't feel unstable and unsteady. You can still bring, we're after a perfect marriage of kind of institutions, but free ones. Like we're not getting rid of all public education, but it's not going to bear any resemblance to the public educational system that we've had. We're not getting rid of all finances immediately, although down the road, we're not going to have any money at all. For a time, it still serves a purpose. It serves a purpose for, there are still some people that need help getting out. There are still some people that that are so full of fear that they don't know what to do unless they're very dependent on any external approval, external, you know, people who really lean on law or tradition. Oh, here's the other thing. So if you look at this, it's going to be in the 5th dimension when we all get there. There's going to be a merger of tradition and the new. One of the problems that we had previously was that things, when they're based solely on a traditional structure, if you can't go forward while looking out the rear view window, it doesn't allow for regeneration and renewal. That's why it became a prison planet. When you're in service to self, where's my triangles? When you're in service to self, I need a different diagram. Damn it. I started to make one and then I dropped it. The higher up you go in dimension, the faster things move. So when you're in density, I want a different diagram, 1 second. Yeah, I don't have one. I started to make it and I didn't finish. I'll use this. Okay, I'm going to talk about this lower, I'm going to use this lower triangle. When you're in density, but if you will, can just think of it as being like half dark. The lower half of this is dark because it goes further into density. It starts out really black and dense toward the bottom because it's most constricted. Stuff down here becomes locked in and it doesn't move. It's the hardest realm to move, especially when they rely on tradition. Nothing moves when you're looking at the way it has been. It has to be done the same old way. And matter, actual substance, is also hardest to move. That's why some of us get so frustrated with things like diet, like physical bodies even. Everything, absolutely everything in the third dimension, when it is reduced, it's reduced to form. It gets locked into form. You're reduced to one identity. You think of yourself as a single person who is separate from all the other people. And then we also, it's so strange in the third dimension, for the lifespans also got shorter. That was one of the manipulations that people really did actually live over 1,000 years. Typically, it was very common. The average lifespan was, 1,000 to 1,200 years. We don't do that anymore. You know why? Because we installed the matrix. We were trying to get as much empathy with other viewpoints to get people to expand their wisdom, to expand their development. We were trying to get each soul to have as many experiences as possible. And one of the things that happens in the third dimension is that you also you lose connection with everything. You lose connection with the cosmos. You lose connection with, you don't see the way you're connected with the other person, so therefore you view them as your enemy. Sometimes you don't view the way you're connected to all of nature. You lose your connection to everything. And your bodies get dense and reduced. There actually was, our appendix was originally designed as a rejuvenation organ. It's responsible for our regeneration. There are natural technologies that allow us to just regenerate. And one of the things that the shortened lifespan did, we did this on purpose. It was part of the energetic construct. Part of the matrix was to shorten lifespans deliberately for a time. Is it the ultimate goal? No, that's not at all the thing you do. What we did in the matrix, in the energetic construct, is to establish something that was going to mix everybody up and establish movement, flow, introduce flow into a system that was so compressed that there was no way in hell it was ever going to live. So we tried to get one figure in there, or multiple, any number of single individuals, and then they just died. Like you plant one, it was such a hostile environment, has been such a hostile environment, that you plant one down and they don't live very long and they die, and the environment is hostile. And if the natives don't slaughter them, you send down Tesla and you say, hey, all he wants to do is bring in updated technology, and and he's killed and attacked, and you're just not treated well if you're somebody who comes in and you say, hi, I'm here to help, and you get punched in the face and crucified or burned alive or whatever. But it's not for lack of trying. So the matrix is yet another attempt. It's not only negative. You get everybody to go in by following some figure that you plant a whole bunch of these figures that are going to catch the attention of the populace, and one person or another is going to appeal to you if you're in the mix. If you're down there on the planet, you're going to follow Jesus, maybe even if he's your enemy, even if you're somebody who hates Jesus. But if you focus on any figure, any icon, pick your poison, or your savior, you focus on them, they are now getting the benefit. As soon as you focus on anything, there's a two-way stream that is built. They have your energy. So that's the way we got each individual's energy to get put into the mix. You're gonna look at Muhammad, or you're gonna look at some entertainment icon. Somebody's got your attention. You're gonna pay attention to Joan of Arc and gonna be captivated by that. You're gonna look at Jesus. You're gonna look at somebody who's in the mix, and that's how we get your energy to go into the collective body. And then once it's in there, we're going to mix it up so that it experiences as many different lifetimes as possible. So you don't have, like by shortening your lifetimes in the short term. So the dark side is always going to get something. The light side is going to get something. You need to know about that. On the Council of Balance, what we're both after is the overall growth, accelerated evolution, accelerated development. And I guarantee you, if you can identify something in the matrix, if you're awakened enough so that you see something in the matrix and you're like, I see that they did that and it sucked. You might be right. You're probably identifying that correctly. My suggestion is don't focus on the dark, because now you're giving the dark the benefit of your energy. Ask yourself, go into spiritual inquiry. That's your first directive from me. If you want my advice, first directive, go into inquiry, go into spiritual searching. And you say, if you identified something that's a piece of crap and you say, I've just discovered there's a cabal. There are reptilians. David Icke was telling the truth the entire time. I'm horrified and I'm really mad. Okay, now what are you going to do? Now that you're correct, now you've discovered this. Are you going to go, it's an option, telling everybody about it, even if you wake them up? Make sure if you're one of the people who, it's like I'm one, who's telling people, reptilians exist and there's a cabal, and I discovered that there's this horrible oppressive regime and there's really pedophilia in the church. Ask yourself, go into spiritual searching immedially for the benefit of the people that you're telling to, because the instant you're telling them, you're not trying to convince them so much because you don't want to take away their choice. But what you do want to do is simply exhibit your light, wear your truth the way you know it, without trying to inflict it on somebody else. You need to actually be the change. You really do need to be the change you want to see in the world. Don't have any expectation that they or insistence that they agree with you, because they might actually be in another triangle, and you don't want somebody to pretend to follow you, or somebody who's not ready to step into spiritual leadership. There are plenty of people who are nowhere near ready for that yet, and you don't want somebody even to be. You never want to go into battle or into any kind of endeavor with somebody when you think that they're your ally, or they say they are, and then it turns out they're not. They're actually manipulative, they're acting behind your back, or they're not sincere. You don't want somebody like that. Wear your truth anyway. Basically, this whole thing is going to sift itself out. There's vibrational drift. The people who tell the truth, regardless, you want to know who they are. The people who lie, regardless, who are really out, who really just want to manage the way they appear to others, they're going to find their tribe too. Everyone has their own tribe. You're going to really want to be with the tribe that is genuine and matches you for real. You might love the people. There might be tons of family members that you really, really love. But if you know that they consistently lie and you value yourself enough to say, well, this is what I know to be true, therefore I have to go in my own portion of the, no disrespect to anyone, but I got to go stand over here. I'm going to stand with the group that I believe, this is what I believe. Just wear it. Just wear yourself openly. And be the light in the world. That's how we're going to lift the entire thing. But don't try to manage your own or deceive other people to make them think that you're something that you're not actually. It's also part of self-love. It's really important. Where was I going with this? I felt like I am. So we get, part of shortening the lifespans was so that everyone could get as many different, it's also a number of different things. So wait, let me finish my first point. If you are someone who is suddenly discovering, as many, many, many people are at this time, holy cow, the church is full of pedophiles. Oh my God, so-and-so is a pervert. There's all of my icons, my Hollywood icons. I believe that this person was a good man. He's my favorite actor. And now look what he did. Is there anybody you can trust? That's asking you to, that's part of the way the matrix is coming down. Now is the time when all icons are being seen for what they actually are. That's the purpose of my talking. So as I was Joan of Arc, and I'm also the voice, the vocal person for this group, my icon is coming down as well. The goal was always to get people to take back their own power. At least that was my goal. To get people to take their own power. It's very, very hard. I will also say this. It's extremely hard to be an icon or a savior figure. It's not an easy experience. I have a lot of sympathy for people in that position. It's also one of the reasons, not the only reason, but because I also had karma. I had a ton of karma. One of the reasons that I was this figure, there's always a good aspect too. You have to be in a position where you if you're going to put somebody in a position that I'm in now, like right now in this lifetime, I'm in this position where I'm going to disclose this information. I've barely broached it. This is the very, very beginning of talking about it. And then I've got this whole other thing I'm supposed to go off and do after this. But I'm going to be writing this book, and all this information is going to come out. And in order to ensure that I could do my role effectively this time, in the most crucial of all of these lifetimes, this is the Ascension Gateway. Like, this is it. It is based, depending on who you are and how you perceive it, it's either the apocalypse or it's whatever. But are we in the end times for this structure? Yeah. It's not that it's the end of the world completely, but it's the end of the old version of the world. We're moving into a new thing entirely. But for the purposes of disclosure, somebody had to disclose the information and make sure the people, somebody who has to be absolutely committed. The person who was who was given the job to deliver this message back to the people has to genuinely care really a lot that they take their power back. And one of the things that how do I say this? It's so difficult. It's a hard thing to talk about. One of the ways we ensured that I would have the necessary skill set, that I myself would be the correct instrument for this job, because you're never going to be given a task if you're unprepared to meet it. You're either going to be a match to it or a match for it. The person that had to be in the position to give everybody back their power has to be somebody who genuinely does not want to keep it. And that would be me. It's really incredibly uncomfortable to be any kind of a savior figure and hold all of this energy and struggle with it. I'm not the only person. There are lots of us, but it's a position that some would covet, and I don't. I hate it. I hate it. I have a very strong desire to serve. Huge desire to serve, but I also don't want to keep it. I've seen firsthand what that leads to. I blew up a planet by accident once. I never want to go back to that again. And that was a really long time ago, long before the drone lifetime. But that's one of the reasons, that the thing that brought me to this position to begin with. I genuinely want other people to have their sovereignty. So that's why I'm supposed to deliver this information, because I was also the one who helped gather it. Whatever you put into this construct is what you're getting out of it. So it's what you're getting back. And I mean that. I mean, I'm totally serious. You vote, every bit of the energy that goes through you bears your energetic signature. So remember, on my previous live streams, please go watch it if you haven't seen them before. I was using this bunch of spaghetti, and when we come down, in a biological form, we're also moving into light body, but for the purpose of the discussion, I'm just talking about our bodies, our physical vessels can only carry so much because it's so condensed. While we're carbon-based, it's a different set of rules when we're going to the fifth dimension, where we're stepping into light body. We're still going to be in a physical form, but we get way more information. We're moving into an expanded physical substance. So we're silicon-based and no longer carbon-based. But for the time being, and we're stepping into that now, but our first creation is ourselves. So I said how we come down and we select, if this is fiber optics, it's not spaghetti, it's fiber optics, and we choose, we make ourselves, some of it we carry in from past lifetimes, but some of it, every lifetime, we get new. So we choose, before we incarnate, we choose the strands we're going to carry in. We say, I want to work on this and this and this. These are the experiences that I know as a soul I'm missing. And so I want to experience something that's going to give me a wider, broader experience, more empathy. Or I treated this person really badly that lifetime. I don't know what it's like to be in a wheelchair. I should have cared for this person more. Many of my lifetimes, let's say, you're somebody who viewed caring for other people as like a big pain in the ass. Like, I wish I didn't have to always take, why do I always have to push this wheelchair? Why do I always have to spoon feed this person? Why do I have to change the grandparents' diapers or whatever? And you were somebody who viewed that as a burden. Or perhaps you did way too much of that, and you need to have a lifetime where now it's you need to experience what it's like to actually be cared for well, because you've never experienced that. You will select an array of vibrations and experiences, and you'll bring this in. And this will basically be your vessel. You choose a little bit like a game board. Like if you imagine, like, I always think of the game, because I do. I always think of like the game board for Candyland. Like you're going to be born in this location, and you're going to end up here, and along the line you arrange, like, at this age I'm going to meet this person, and we're going to go from here to here together. It basically works that way, but you choose your frequencies. The other thing you choose is, so let's say this is not exactly a perfect analogy, because all the strands are the same length, and it's a fairly close analogy. But let's say if this was all fiber optics, and each one of these, you take on certain templates by percentages, basically, but you could choose to have only one strand from I don't know, what, like a couple of strands from the Joan of Arc template, and a couple of strands from Isis, and a couple of strands from any number of, you know, various archetypes, depending on the experience that you want. But then you also have different ratios of them. So you could lengthen certain strands and shorten others, and you create your own really strange, completely unique pattern that is never going to be repeated ever. So all of the energy, if this is fiber optics, you're also going to make, you can morph it to a degree as you go through your life. So you're always changing by virtue of the way you react. If this is fiber optics and you are an incredibly fearful person, you've got a basic recipe, but let's say like half of it is dark because half the time you're terrified, you're very depressed, you're carrying a lot of resentment, you really don't work on yourself, you feel a negative feeling, and instead of dealing with it and processing it and transmuting it to light, you store it, you stuff it, I don't know, let's say you turn it, you get really angry and you attack somebody else. Your light strands are going to gradually get darker and darker and darker because that's what you did with yourself. As you clean yourself up, you can also, like, sometimes if you hang out with a really bad crowd, or you abuse substances, you are an alcoholic and you hang out with a lot of other alcoholics, a lot of depressive people, you never try to get yourself out of a bad circumstance, you are committed to staying with something that you know is unhealthy, your own strands of light are going to gradually accumulate a lot of darkness. So what you do with your own self, that's where your choice lies for the purpose of your lifetime. You can make yourself, by virtue of how you respond to circumstances, you're going to wind up putting yourself in one of these. If this is the model, when you bring yourself into this center, by virtue of what you do with yourself, you're either going to clean up your own act and you're going to rise and you're going to make yourself the best, highest version of yourself, and you're going to go into this triangle, which is all light, or you're going to allow yourself a certain leeway to not, like, I'm going to let myself slide, I'm going to lie about that, I'm going to not live up to my own highest aspirations, I'm going to forget about what I really came in here to do and pretend that I'm satisfied when I'm not, or whatever. If you let life really, really get to you, you're going to wind up sinking. And that's how, from position, you might have even come in, fairly clean, but life really got to you and you let it tank you, and you wind up, by virtue of vibrational drift, you wind up going down to a pretty dark state. Most of the time, when people often when they're young, they start out, they start out kind of cleaner than they end up sometimes. But then it's very interesting because another way that it can work is that you can, and a lot of the saints, if you'll notice, a lot of spiritual figures go through periods where they start out very dark and then they wind up going through experiences and turning it into something that's very light. And a lot of saints have done that. And no matter what religion you go into, there are a lot of people like that. Like, in general, the stronger you are as a spiritual warrior, doesn't matter what religion you come in, or if you come into a religion at all, but you'll go through dark experiences, and because of that, you wind up bouncing, because you can't pull on just one end of a rubber band. So if somebody if there is a soul that's really committed to spiritual growth, or committed to being a very good spiritual example for others, you might come in I can't remember the guy's name. Damn it. I was going to use an example, but now I forgot. You might come in and have a very dark beginning. And in order to transmute it and possibly in order to transmute it in a very public forum, so that if you pick up a whole bunch of, I wish I could think of a good, who's that guy? Is it Russell Brand? I believe it's Russell Brand. Started out as an addict, didn't start out as an addict, but very heavy, very dark experiences very early on, and then turned into like a spiritual guru. And what happens when you do that is that you very often take your population with you. So for example, and that's a really, really good way to lift a lot of people. If you're, for example, if you're very heavily in the public eye, if you're somebody who goes into something like a situation where you're in, maybe in Hollywood, or you've got this huge following that's very third dimensional based, and you have a lot of eyes on you, and it's maybe your fan base is a group that would never come across spiritual literacy or they're not attracted to that. Basically, they're not attracted to that. They're attracted to whatever you are when you get them as your fan base. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that it's low consciousness, and you're in Hollywood and you're a big megastar, and most of your fan base is not too, what do I want to say, highbrow, not too spiritually inclined. As if you pick them up from an energetic perspective, and you travel up with your own spiritual development, you pull them up with you. You're lifting. It's a way that you can lift and transmute for the collective. And it takes a strong spiritual warrior to do that. If this is your fan base and they're, you gather them down here, and they're like, most of the weight is well, let's just say it's a very low dimensional fan base. If they're watching you consistently and feeding their attention to you, and you're as a, I can say this from personal experience, if you're capable of carrying that much energy, let's say you are, I wish I could think of a good example. Let's say you're somebody who, and this is your fan base, like you're, I'm going to use a different one. Let's say you're red, and this is because it's very physically based fan base, and they've never heard of awakening. And let's say that they're very invested in third dimensional paradigms and structures. If you pick up a following down here, but then you change yourself, you don't have to preach to your or convince anybody actually of your point of view. You don't have to wrestle them with an argument. You can if you want, but you don't have to. Most of the time, if you do that, they'll be repelled. But what you can do, if you're in an energetic stream, you can transmute all of the negativity that comes to you. That's a tremendous service. You transmute it when, so that's like those of us who are empaths, when we transmute or clear for the collective, we will feel very often people, I'm one of them, who have these enormous toroidal fields, and your energetic influence extends very far. And so it dominates from an energetic perspective. I can make my energetic field be the dominant tuning fork that kind of overrides with frequency. Any light worker can, by the way. If you're in a body and you raise your own vibrational frequency, your higher vibrational frequency is going to dominate the lower one. So if you don't have to go and and coerce anybody or convince anybody to be a light worker too. There's a, there's a conspiracy theory, or it's not even a theory. There's all sorts of pedophilia in Hollywood, and I'm going to tell you all about reptilians and blah, 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 blah. Here's my book David Icke wrote. You should read it too and be awakened. A lot of people are going to be repelled. If they ask, that's one thing. Wear your knowledge proudly, but the thing that you could do to actually change more, if your interest is in changing others or transmuting it, first of all you have to do is get your own frequency up, radiate it out, and one person that's in a conflict zone who is able to simply go into a place of meditation and really be peaceful. You can go directly into a war zone and meditate and instantly bring peace. And by the way, if you want to look up the Battle of Patay. That's exactly what we did. Sometime I'm going to talk about certain Joan of Arc memories or things, instances in that lifetime. My guides keep saying that I need to use that as an example, an illustration. There was a famous Battle of Patay where there was no fighting. There was about 80 years into the 100 Years' War, and it was two armies who met on a battlefield after 80 years of fighting, and there was not one drop of blood shed. They all went home. We looked them in the eye, and we had nothing. We had nothing. We showed up with nothing because there was nothing. We just showed up. And from an energetic platform, you just bring peace and you say, no way in hell. No, you're not doing it. Whatever. There is a way to bring peace to, even though a circumstance is wound up as tight as it could possibly get. They think they're going to win this day because they've won for the last 80 years. And they're in a position where they're here and we're down here. And we have no weapons. You show up with a broken spoon and one tooth left in your head and rags, and after, years of starving. But you just don't, basically there's more power from a place of vibrational weight where it dominates. This will separate. When the darkness has power, there's a separation, and then there's immediate collapse. There's an immediate collapse because the darkness goes down. It goes down into a place of collapse. It brings a tower moment. A tower moment is when you've pushed things too far and it hasn't balanced out, and spirit nudges you and nudges you. You ignore spirit for too long and you bring down your own demise, is basically what it is. The balance that you want is where you leave space. You keep yourself. It's a weird illustration. Is it exact? It's an analogy. It's a diagram. Is it really exactly like this? No, but it's basically where you keep yourself a little humble. If you have this much power, be responsible and bring it back to this. That's your job. But that's the thing. Like, if you have this much power, it is your job. And if you don't do it, then God will take it from you. That's basically the way it works. What else was I going? I feel like I started to talk. Let me go back to my how are we doing on time? 2 hours and 13 minutes, not too bad. So there's a shared skill set within this dynamic. So what we're doing. So here's the matrix, basically. Basically the matrix model. These two triangles, one pointed up and one pointed down, they're separating. In 2013, when my awakening happened, and I was already awake in 3. And I was doing pretty well. Almost nothing ever got me upset. I was really, really balanced for a very long time. And I remember I was given a choice. Like my guides came to me one day and said, I should really, I'm going to wind up writing the story. I don't really want to go into it now, but they said, do you want to go to the next level? And I was like totally gung-ho. I was so excited. I said yes before they finished talking. And they kept asking me for 2 weeks, and they said, if you say yes, it's going to traumatize you. There's something about yourself that you don't know. And if you say yes, it's going to traumatize you. And I said yes anyway, because I thought this was stupid, but I said it. My soul wanted it, even though I'm not entirely sure I should have. Anyway, too late now. I had to have a choice this time. They said there's something about, to me, there's something about yourself that you don't know. And when you find out, it's going to traumatize you. And they asked me repeatedly for about 2 weeks before, before like my choice had been made. They gave me a window of opportunity to choose. And I said yes every single time. I was so excited. And when they told me that I would be traumatized, I thought, I didn't really think it through. I thought to myself, I've been through so much trauma already that what I should have thought was, well, I've been through so much trauma already that in order for something to traumatize me, since there's almost nothing that really upsets me, in order for something to really traumatize me, it would have to be pretty horrendous. and it was. It was. But I said yes. I was like totally gung-ho. And then Margaret Donor, I went to, she's an angelic channel. This isn't what I was going to talk about, but I'll tell you briefly. An angelic channel in Woodstock. And someone, my friend, had a session with her and immediately purchased one for me and said, I'm gifting you a session. I think you need to go see Margaret Donor. And then she drove me there. Said, I'm taking you for your birthday. I'm giving you this. This was in 2012. She said, I'm giving you a session with Margaret Donor. And she's an angelic channel and a past life Akashic record reader. She's written a number of books, and she talks a lot about alien races and various different alien species. She wrote Merlin's War. And at any rate, I was gifted this session, and I didn't know anything about it, and I went for it. And for some reason, and now I know what it is, but I didn't know what it was then. For some reason, when it was time for my session, she looked at my friend, and she said, you should come in too. She said, I don't know why, I just feel like you're supposed to be there too. So I said, so we both went in. And it turns out that the reason for that Zoya went in was to be a witness. There was actually she was, my friend Zoya was there at the Joan of Arc lifetime too. She was Yolanda of Aragon. And we have a very strong past life connection. And she's the one who went with me to Europe when I went to France alone, but we went through Europe together. And anyway, people incarnate in groups. So the people that your close associates now, there's a very good chance, and your family members, you know, we incarnate in groups. So I remember we taped my session too. It was a taped session, and I sat there in the chair, had no expectation of anything. And Margaret Donor, she's an angelic channel and past life reader. And she closed her eyes, and when she opened her eyes, she was, whoops, I'm gonna plug in, there we go. Hang on a minute. She was, she had a look of surprise on her face. Someplace I have this tape. It's still on a tape. Angel Session, 2012. But she got a look of real surprise. And I've listened to the tape. The first thing she said was, I've been doing this work for 20 years. There's a new angel here. I've never seen this one before. And she was really surprised. And she said, it's the angel of courage. And she said, you don't know who you are yet. And when you find, but you're going to find out. And in that session, she didn't mention the name Joan of Arc, but she described the entire thing. She described me as, she said, many lifetimes you were sent out way ahead of the army as a child with like a little drum. And everybody thought it was some kind of a privilege except for you. You didn't know why you were chosen or why, I feel that. Or why you were the first one to be sent out to basically be slaughtered. And everybody seemed to think that it was some kind of a privilege, but you didn't even want it. It was just something like somebody plucked you and said, here, you're going to go way out there, but your army is way, 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 way behind you. And you were the first one killed. Basically, they shot you down. And it's not even the first time. She said, basically, you just like were a little child and you went out first ahead of the army, way far ahead of the army. And then she went, and I won't get into the whole thing, but she wound up talking about that she said, at some point, you're going to find out who it was, and it's going to be very traumatic. At the time, I remember, this is terrible, but at the time I was kind of judgmental because number one, it didn't, certain parts of what she said really did upset me. Like she also talked to me about the fact that I had lost a child in a fire. And now I know that was another lifetime where the children that I have now, my two daughters, my house had caught on fire. Because, you know, like one time, every once in a while, you'll have a lifetime that is so energetically complex. It has so many issues attached to it that rebalancing after it it takes tons of lifetimes to rebalance or accommodate it. Like the Joan lifetime was so energetically colossal that even to go in and karmically adjust. I've had lots of lifetimes balancing, learning things that, you know, that lifetime carried so much trauma that undoing it, or even recovery is a better word, recovering from it, there was a lot of like offshoots. It took a lot of different directions. And my daughter Calico actually remembers this too, and so does my daughter Cricket. We had another lifetime where I was a homesteader in Canada, and I had twins. I had twin children, and one was in a crib sleeping upstairs, and our house caught on fire, and I was able to get my daughter Cricket, at the time was a baby, and I was able to run with her outside and threw her off backwards into the darkness and ran back in the house to get my other child, who was upstairs in the crib. That was Calico, and my daughter in this lifetime is Calico. And I was unable to save her, and she died in the fire. And that's the lifetime that first came through when I was talking with Margaret Donor. She told me that I was a child in the army, and the army was going to fall away and whatever, and I'd been slaughtered, and it wasn't the first time that I'd done it, that I've taken this role before. And now I know that the child warrior that I was Joan of Arc. I've also done the child aspect of King David. But the army that was way behind me were the indigo children who come in, you know, basically 600 years later. That's really the rest of my army. But I had to learn. You know, the Joan of Arc lifetime also set me up where I got incredibly judgmental, hostile, resentful, really traumatized, really upset that I hadn't been, you know, felt victimized. You go into these areas in order to, basically, it's this thing. You go into the depths of the darkness in order to climb back out of it. And I went into the victimization. I mean, it really doesn't get much more victimized or much more off balance, where you know, talk about taking, where's the other one? Taking the service model to the nth degree, where you start out here and you give the Dauphin the crown, and you expect, very much like the social structures now. Like, we've given our power to the government. Like, well, you're going to take care of us, right? After all, we elected you. You're going to be a good elected official, right? We gave you the power, right? And now we're believing that you're going to do a good job and take care of us in exchange. And in the Joan lifetime, it established a pattern of imbalance, grave imbalance, where I give the crown to a king and I put him on the throne. I say, here, you know, I saved you your country. And in exchange, he doesn't even bother paying my ransom, leaves me in jail, and they burn me alive. It's a very uneven structure of that, you know, distribution of power, where you take your best asset and you lock it in a cell, you torture it, and then you burn it alive as an example. Make sure nobody ever does that again. But that lifetime planted the seeds. That was basically the imbalance that was set in place to create something that would break itself out of the matrix structure. And it really couldn't happen any other way, if you think about it. I mean, it was a terrible strategy, but recovering from that has really been its own nightmare, or extremely complicated from a personal standpoint. But I can say that this takes me back to a point I started to say earlier. When you're in a position of knowing that you've got this information, let's say you're aware now that you're aware that there is a matrix, you have woken up, you know that the conspiracy is not a theory. You're becoming aware, like all of this information is coming out. And the question is now, what are you going to do with it? The responsible thing is to wear your knowledge outright. Don't try to inflict it on anybody, but become the spiritual leader. Because when you're awakened, and when you're awakened, your vibrational frequency is, you're coming out of density, right? You're coming out of density. And so when you come out of density, your vibration is already rising. You're becoming more and more aware. You have a higher light quotient. When you have a higher light quotient, you go up in strata. Where's my, I want this one. You go up in strata. When you go up in strata, you're automatically in a position to be a wise steward for other people who are still trapped in density. That's why when people who have these fan bases, who are connected to others, like let's say Jim Carrey, who started out in, you know, his fan base was not exactly a spiritual one at the beginning. But you've watched him. He is somebody who has gone through a spiritual awakening while being in the public eye, and he's pulling his entire fan base up with him. They get the benefit of the higher vibrational frequencies that he's delivering, or someone like that. I don't know him, and I probably shouldn't, but you know, someone like that. The energy stream always runs in two directions. So you're getting, this is one of the ways that they feel they're going to pick up on your energetic signature. If yours is a high vibrational frequency, they're going to pick up, and they may not realize it. So that's the thing. Like, if they're still sleeping, they're still sleeping. And you don't have to go rapping on their head and say, wake up, wake up. You might want to. But they're just going to pick it up. But they get steered by autopilot. Their steering mechanism, that's why, like, it happens in the fourth dimension. In the fourth dimension is where the archons, the archangels, and a lot of the spirit guides work. In the fifth dimension, the guidance system really changes, because you're like all icons and that kind of steerage, that kind of mechanism stays in 4. It stays in the fourth dimension. In the fifth dimension, we don't have icons. We don't, like, there is actual equality. You see everybody's energetic signature. You see them for what they are. There's no more hiding. There's no more facade. There's full transparency. It doesn't mean you have to spill your secrets. You know, doesn't mean you have to let everybody watch you on the toilet. But there is you are able to withstand full transparency. And everyone in 5 has chosen to be there. It's not a prison system. There's a tremendous amount of flow. Things move much faster. I started to talk about this. In the third dimension and lower dimensions, everything in the third dimension is it's linear, right? There's time. This is where time is locked in. You're locked into one experience at a time, kind of like a film strip. Everything goes one moment to moment to moment to moment. And you're always in the eternal now, but there's a past and a future that you can identify because your position is kind of static. In the, as you go up, everything gets more nebulous, but consequently, there's also a lot of room to move. In the third dimension, physical form, like things have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and everything is reduced and compressed. Compressed is a good way to put it. When you go up to, like in 4 is where you get things are semi-solid, like ghosts are in 4. The spirit realm is in 4. Things are semi-solid. Things appear and disappear. Sometimes they're here, sometimes they're not. It seems very unstable to somebody who views third dimension as security, but it feels much more stable, and it's a lot safer in a lot of ways, because if you can just get through 4, the fourth dimension is it's like the Ouija board area. It's like the area where there's nothing can really be trusted. There's still a lot of deception that goes on in the fourth dimension. Tremendous amount of deception in the third dimension. If you think the third dimension is safe, then you're probably just still asleep. The third dimension on planet Earth, the way it has been traditionally, is one of the more dangerous places. It's considered that way. It's dangerous, kind of like the way going back in time is dangerous. Like you think you see things or practices or something, and it just seems so unbelievably primitive. Like, I can't believe that people actually used to think that that was okay and believed it was okay. There are things that go on in this world now that are so looked on as being so incredibly primitive, it's almost indescribable. The idea that you can capture another being and use it for testing. Here's the thing you need to know about that. In making your own choices now, you need to know that all of the choices that you make now are going to determine your strata. And if you can be bought, you can be sold. The rule of thumb is, the rule of thumb, it's a law, it's what it is. It is as above, so below. You're going to get whatever you said was okay for another being. You are. You do. When the matrix comes down, so for example, if you regularly eat even if you sometimes eat it, if you eat factory farmed meat, you're saying with your personal energetic signature, which has your personal energetic stamp on it, you're saying, I give this my vote. I'm saying in my world, this is okay. I'm saying that this is okay. These are the rules that can touch me. It's okay for me to be born into captivity, kept in a little pen, and used, being tested on by other beings. Other beings are allowed to capture me and eat me, even if I want to live. If you did it to someone else, you're saying that that's okay for you. It really behooves you to pay attention to, so this is one thing I do. When I deal with other people, I flip the circumstance around and I actually do try to put myself in that exact position, and I see if I have any beef with the situation. Like, am I going to have an argument when it's my turn? Since everything rotates in the third dimension, it's going to come back around to you. You're picking a strata. Like if you're going to choose your strata based on your energetic signature, you're going to pick a level, and it's going to go around in a circle on that level like it's a record. So if you pass, anybody who comes into your field is yours to address. It's yours to address. It's your problem, your issue. It's basically everything is a spiritual test. What will you, or how will you respond to this thing that's in your face right now? If you see a homeless person and you walk by because you have to get to work on time, if you don't address that, you're saying, when it's my turn to be, you're saying, number one, it's okay to walk by a homeless person and not ask if they're okay. It's okay for some people to be completely ignored because somebody else has someplace they'd rather be. You just need, it's not a judgment, it's just a measurement. Put yourself into the position of every other thing that you encounter and ask yourself, is this okay when that's my turn? Because if that's going to be if that's another aspect of you, because it is, am I willing to have this thing happen to me when it's my turn to be that being? If you use that as a rule of thumb to gauge your own behavior, you'll do real well. So I was asking myself this question earlier when I was swatting flies, because I was swatting flies. I talked to the fly oversoul. I talked to all of the benevolence in the universe. I've been having a fly problem here for the last 2 days. I don't know where there are maggots, but there have to be, because I woke up and there were about 40 flies in the house, and I've searched this entire apartment. I haven't been able to find them. All the cages are cleaned. I looked for rotting fruit. I checked all the plants. There was an open window, but I don't see that would make 40 flies. I don't know. I can't find them. They're still flying around. But I opened the door and I said, because I don't want to kill things willy-nilly. I don't want to kill for the sake of killing, but I do need all the flies out of my house. So I said, fly over soul. I call upon all of the benevolence of the universe to assist me to help get these flies out of my space. I'm claiming my space, but I'm also giving the flies a place to live. I'm opening the door so that they have a chance to leave. And I'm saying to the fly over soul, now's your chance. I'm giving you 10 minutes to fly out the door, all of you. Also, get all of your people out. I did say, too, that if you tell me where the maggots are, I will take the maggots outside, because I'm not going to rob anybody of their population. Flies need to live, too. If somebody has, if the flies are creating a population, I know that I don't like it when my babies are taken from me. Thank you, I see that. I don't want to lay my eggs someplace and have somebody declare them a nuisance and simply wipe them off the board. Part of being a responsible steward is to say that you have the right to exist. You're part of the ecosystem. I value your presence in the world, but I also want my own space clear. So tell me where the maggots are, and I will go scoop them up. I'll put them outside, but I also want all these flies out of my house. I'm giving you a sufficient amount of time to actually make that happen. I'm opening all the doors and all the windows. I'm going to start swatting in 10 minutes. Tell them your intent. So that's one of the things that happens in the, that's one of the rules, like on the Council of Balance. You have to tell them what you're doing. You have to tell the population what's going on. Tell them. The hope is that they listen. If they're too asleep, like if the population of the world is too asleep and you say, oh, I don't know, whatever you say, like we'll there will be disclosures and things that come down into material. One of the notions is that have you ever heard that thing, like something's like a piece of conspiracy information or information is hidden in plain sight? I have mixed feelings about that phrase, because actually nothing is hidden. It's in plain sight. It's just in plain sight. If it's hidden, it's because you didn't have the eyes to see it. But it's the whole idea of a piece of information being hidden in plain sight. That kind of makes it seem like the spirit guides are trying to get you not to see it, or like we hid it so that we were hiding it. Really, that there's really a lot of power that's being missed when you say the powers that be or the cabal or the Illuminati hid it because they have to tell you what they're doing, but they don't actually want you to see it. Bullshit. We're desperately trying to get it through your heads, to be honest. I can tell you on the council, I'm sorry, I'm yelling, but on the Council of Balance, it is just astonishing the number of things that we have just done everything in our power to try to make it so you fucking notice it. And they just don't notice it. You put it on the dollar bills, you put symbols on the cereal, you put symbols, you put it here and here and here and here and here and here and here, and they say, oh, the Illuminati hides things from us. Fuck you, you stupid idiots. Open your eyes. We're doing everything we can possibly do to throttle you with this information, trying to get it through your heads. We put Baphomet on the, in the Grammy Awards. There are some people, if you have eyes to see it, if you are sufficiently awakened, then you'll see it, and it will be so obvious, and you'll be like, how the hell did I ever miss this? Why did I not see it before? But don't give your power away to the Illuminati and say somebody hid it and was trying to get it, it's a secret, but no, we plastered it everywhere. It is literally everywhere. So one of the things you can do, and we ask, please don't hide your knowledge under a bushel. If you're somebody who knows this, don't ever go someplace and say, well, my family wouldn't understand, so I'm not going to broach the subject with that person because that person doesn't know, and they wouldn't understand it. Please help with the wake-up process. By the way, there's the all-seeing eye. It's right on the, do you see this symbol? That's another symbol for this or whatever. There are some places that are so dark or so unconscious or so unaware that they're not going to get the information unless somebody goes in there with it. So if you have the opportunity, if you know that members of your family are asleep, be brave enough to wear your own light proudly if you're proud of yourself. If you have something to be proud of your own self. And if you're really committed to truth, then don't allow yourself to be contaminated by fear and let that tank you and drag your own vibration down. Wear your light as proudly as possible. Be part of the process of transmuting the darkness and be part of the light that's on the planet and say, this is what I know. I learned this. And now I tell everybody, you don't have to force it on them. Just be the light and walk through the world. And having a higher vibrational frequency will simply change everything, but not if you don't do it. If you don't do it, nothing gets done. That's true. So where was I going with this? I talked about my diagrams. We're 2 hours and 43 minutes. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So I haven't really figured out exactly how. Basically, you're going to get back whatever you put into it. So if you have an interest in going up in dimension and in making yourself a light being, you're going to get back whatever you put in. Oh, so that takes me back to the flies. I asked myself this question: do I have a problem with somebody, with me? If I was in the position of a fly and I'm buzzing around, do I have a problem with sudden death? And my answer is no. And that's why I'm saying, okay, I will swat the flies, because I really think that I've acted responsibly. I've taken care of, I've been a wise steward of the, I'm not killing all the flies. I'm only killing the ones in my space, and I'm very willing to have them leave. And when it comes to, you know, we're going up into dimension where there are, not to scare the crap out of anybody, but there really are other alien species that view human beings in general as nuisance species. Like, they view us as, and who blames them? We're considered, like, Earth in general is considered kind of has been considered a hostile place to go. It's a danger. It's like they don't want human beings going to inner Earth. They don't want human beings contaminating. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I don't want a turd in my soup either. If somebody's going to bring that crap in, I don't want it. Keep them over there. I'm not saying they don't have a right to exist, but you have to keep that thing over there. Do not bring it by me. So your job, when you purify your own space and you act in a responsible way, you're saying, this is what I personally, with my own energetic signature, this is what I will and will not allow. So you're setting the template for yourself. So if you're saying, you know, because it is your choice. Will you eat bacon or not? Are you willing to be the pig or live a pig-like experience? What are you saying yes to? Is a larger being who has a predominance of power allowed in your world to come and breed you and keep you in a cage your entire life, never let you see anything pleasant? You're going to have a miserable experience, and then they're going to kill you and eat you. Is that okay with you? If you say yes, then then you're saying yes to that. Then don't complain or say that it's unjust when it does happen to you. I'll use this example. There are a lot of people who think that this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. A lot of people, I'm not going to name names, but I will give you, this is a good example. I spent some time thinking about this example in the last couple of days. My ex-husband's name is Michael, and no matter what I think about him, and no matter how, you know, nasty the divorce was or whatever, he's still entitled to his own name. I know somebody who has never called him Michael, refused to call him Michael the entire time this person knew him, our entire marriage. There was somebody who called him Mike and insisted on calling him Mike the entire time, no matter how many times they were corrected. And their rationale was, well, I already know a Michael, and it's my husband, so I'm going to call this person Mike because I'm going to determine, I'm going to call this person Mike because I already know a Michael. The right to, so the reason this really caught my interest is because this particular person has an idea of themselves as somebody who's very into social justice and views themselves as the right party, thinks of themselves as a very tolerant person who wants peace, who wants diversity, who thinks of themselves, has a particular self-image, and is very vocal that women deserve rights, and this person has to have whatever. Equal rights, equal rights, equal rights. When it comes down to you, You can't insist that all the other people are the ones that have to change. If you insist, if you claim that it's very unfair that you don't have your enough of an individual identity, that somebody hasn't given you appropriate acknowledgement, this person is very into the upset at women not being treated fairly. Women haven't been considered equal. This person is it's an issue. Like, it comes up in conversation a lot. But then the minutia, the small things that you allow to accrue with your daily decisions really, really contributes to where you are positioning yourself on this strata. If you don't allow other people to disagree with you and coexist, her rationale, because I did ask, I said, his name is Michael. Please call him Michael. He doesn't like the name Mike. We've asked you this before. And this person's response was, because my ex-husband did act badly. He did do certain things. Whatever. It's not important because everyone makes mistakes. If you are constantly focusing forevermore on the fact that somebody did something wrong and therefore, or you disagree with it, it's more like that. I disagree with the thing that this person did, and therefore I'm gonna say what this person's called. Well, if that's the stance that you're taking, you're never gonna get women's rights, ever. If you deny, when the choice point comes to you, and you have the power to say, will I give this person the choice to dictate something as simple as what I want to be called, my own personal identity, that really is only going to affect that person. It's really, every person is entitled to their own individual identity, to claim who they are. So if you take that, if you're in a position where you're going to deny somebody their own individual identity when it doesn't even affect you, then don't complain when, by extension, the power structure at large doesn't give you any acknowledgement of yourself and your own rights. You did it to yourself. You can't always say that the other party is wrong if you want peace. You have to actually be peaceful. The person who refuses to call my ex-husband Michael, I'm not actually being judgmental. I'm just looking at the situation and looking at behavioral patterns, and there's a reason this person is trapped in density the way they are, and I would be extremely shocked if they wind up going to 5 in this ascension cycle, based on everything else. It's accrued and accrued and accrued and accrued, and the motivation for it's very interesting. In 2013, my guides gave, when I first woke up and remembered that I was Joan of Arc, and I remembered my mission, my job this time. It's like you came back to finish the job that you started then. And this is your job this time. And there was a tremendous amount of trauma. And in the process of reintegration, because I went into extreme self-conflict, hatred, self-hatred. Oh my God. I had to find that and bring that to a place of integration where I wasn't just in perpetual self-hatred. Guilt, shame, apology, tremendous apology, anger, everything, you name it, fear, tons of fear. And it took me a really long time. but fortunately I have a real strong connection with my guides, and they talked me through the entire thing. Because I was also purging for not just, if it was just my own personal stuff, that would be one thing, but that wasn't it. It was the fact that I was purging for, you know, my entire collective. I'm doing a collective purge, and I'm on about half of these points. So the amount of conflict energy and having, you know, that's what I came here for. I'm a mass transmuter. So it wasn't just my own self-hatred, it was conflict. I was basically trying to go into the darkness so that I can merge the dark and the light together. You go from a place of light, being extreme light being in 12, and also be down to 3, and somehow bring them back together. Harmonize those things. They don't go together easily because they're very, very, very different places. So where was I going with this? I was talking about conflict. Wait a second. I was talking about it. What was I just talking about? It wasn't Jonah. I was talking about Joan of Arc, but then right before then. You're going to get out of it what you put in. Exactly. Oh, so in 2013, when my memories came back, one of the things that my guides had said was they gave me a list of 6 people in my life now, or in my life at the time. They gave me a list of 6 people, and they said that these are the 6 people that they're really going to tempt you. You're going to be very, very tempted by these 6 individuals. And they said some of these people will meet you on the other side, and some of them won't. But everybody has to go through the doorway themselves. But you're going to be tested by these 6 people. For a time, I remember thinking that I thought that it was going to be 3 and 3. Is really what I thought. I hoped that all 6 people would go. The 6 people were, it was my best friend and lifelong friend, Zoya, and my father. It kind of was like in pairs. It was Zoya and my father were one pair that were going to test me. My 2 children, Cricket and Calico, they were going to test me. And then Josh and Carmen were the other ones. And what they said, what my guides had said, was that these were the 6 people. So it's like not even the people that you would necessarily think. But they were the people that I would be tempted by. These were all people who were going to try to, for one reason or another, I would be very tempted to veer off my own authentic path in order to please them, because I love them all so much and I want them to be happy. I just want them to be happy so much that they're going to ask you to do these things or something in some way or another. They're going to want you to do something to make them happy. And because you want them to be happy so much, you're going to be very tempted to do what they expect of you or what they ask of you, rather than what you know you're supposed to do. And I felt every last one of those temptations terribly, where I know I want to please this person so much. I want them to have what they want. I want to do what they want me to do. They're asking something of me and I want to give it to them. I'm so tempted to just give them what they want because I want them to be happy. And it's really not for me to decide every person has to go through this doorway on their own. The doorway is basically, it's basically the ascension gateway is basically the doorway. Everybody's gonna pick their own level. Everybody is gonna make themselves, they've got to have the freedom to be who they are and rise to their own level. So it's very interesting. You know, sometimes you just want to take people with you. And I know I'm not alone in this. There's particularly when we first wake up, like the last 2 years, I spoke to so many people, particularly when people are first awakening and they learn that ascension is a thing, and they learn that there are different dimensions and like not everybody's going, and then they get the first thing almost invariably. The first thing most of us do, I know I did, is clutch at my family members. Because you don't want to go without your kids. You don't want to go without your family members. But you know, you have to make a really tough call. Is this person themselves, are they coming or not? How authentic are they? Do you have to get a divorce or not? You're going to have to make the really tough decision. And to what degree do you value your own truth and your own authenticity more than you value pleasing other people? People pleasing can be a real trap. Because so many of us, especially those of us who really love peace, we're tempted to keep the peace by never making any waves. That's a real trap for a lot of people. And it's so often, especially those of us who are very service oriented, we're like, well, I'm just going to overextend myself. You have to make sure that when you're in this position, when you're in this position and this person maybe already has enough, but they want more. Or sometimes we start over here and we're in a position where we are balanced, but we go out of like, I know that I fall into this category a lot if I'm not careful. I will go into over service and please somebody, even though they really should be doing work themselves, but it's easier for me to do it. And they object. Sometimes the people who really need to be doing their own work are not the ones who are doing their work, and a certain amount of struggle would do them real well. They would actually grow a lot more from that. That's one of the things that was considered a lot on the Council of Balance, where we talk about, you know, how much growth is it? What is on the Council of Balance? Our job was to determine it was basically to determine the distribution of dark and light occurrences on Earth. Where like certain concentrations, like if you imagine a checkerboard, and if you put more, if you divide it, if you keep dividing a checkerboard, it's basically eventually going to take yourself back into dark and light that's so evenly distributed that it goes back basically into unity. It's like static on a television screen. If you had a television screen that was half dark and half light, then you divided it again, and it would, if you kept dividing it, it would turn into a checkerboard. And then if you kept dividing it, it would basically go back into unity, which would be like static. A distribution that's like static would be an instance where like every person has equal amounts of light and dark, and every person is more or less their own gauge. They balance themselves. That's more of what we're doing in the fifth dimension. It's not like it's all light all the time. It's that because there's still going to be growth. And it's not really going to be half and half, but you go through a stage where it's half and half, and everybody knows how to transmute. Everybody knows how to deal with darkness appropriately, and you have unity from a place of equality because the dark and light are equally distributed, so there's no imbalance of power. In the third, but that's like a later stage, and there's been all of these movements. Like when I say that I orchestrate mass migrations, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about how you get something that's in total density to be half light, equally distributed. And it's been a process that's taken thousands of years to try and get people up and moving, because you have to accommodate the movement. And And also you have to accommodate the responses or the reactions of all of the events that you orchestrate. Sometimes you want you think, well, if they handle this appropriately, they could transmute this in a heartbeat if it's handled appropriately. But if they keep themselves into conflict, they've turned it dark, and now look what it is. So you have to, there's like a way to play it, then there's a way it's going to take you down too. So, and sometimes you can just hope for the best outcome. I wanted all of my family to come with me. My original plan in 2013 was to buy Anna Divine School. I knew that I had to divorce my husband because my guide said, he can't go where you're going. That was the sentence. He can't go where you're going. And that I knew I was going to have to move, but I didn't want to leave him behind her. I didn't think he was, a horrible person. I still loved him. I wanted to make sure he was well taken care of, and I thought that I was going to move a mile down the road, and we would still share the kids back and forth, and they would go to school there, and he would be able to have a different job if he wanted, because I thought he could just work at the school, and that would be fine. And he could teach improv because he always wanted to do theater, and I thought that that would be a fine idea, and everybody's happy, and we don't have to have that kind of division and hostility. Never even crossed my mind that I was going to get it. Because I'm coming from a place that I kind of naturally unify things and naturally go for balance. He naturally goes for something different, so that's why he can't go where I'm going. So it turns out that I did have to actually divorce him and leave him behind. I thought that I wanted to take both my kids too, but one of my children doesn't want to do that. Or at least she doesn't yet. So that's why I live with one and not the other. You have to let people have if I want freedom to go my own direction, and I want the freedom to do that and evolve myself and build myself into my own individual experience, if I want that privilege, you have to afford it to another person. And it's not right for somebody to, so it's different. I was thinking about this because sometimes I referred to this same person. I called him Jackass the other day. I actually kind of draw a distinction between, like, if you insult somebody, but at least it's honest. Like when I call somebody a jackass, I'm not saying that that's his name. It's clearly my own opinion. So that's on me. It's actually just, I view calling someone jackass is kind of like an honest thing to do. I don't even really think it's an insult. It's basically my own opinion about him in this particular situation. But it really says more, it says as much about me as it does about him. It's basically just an expression of my own opinion. So I was going to talk about this issue and Trump, because there are energetic dynamics. Oh, going back, wait, I just want to finish this one point. The 6 people on my list, it was Zoya and my father who wanted me to act in a certain way. They wanted me to do certain things that were very old, well, whatever, basically more traditional. Both of them are very invested in the 3rd dimensional paradigms, and they love me. And because I love them, I would be tempted to go do what they wanted me to do. Both my children wanted me to do certain things that, because I know I have this job, I have to be pulled in this particular direction. I have to do this other thing, and I can't spend as much time purely with them as I wanted to. Josh and Carmen were the other one. The other pair, where I know they want something of me, and as much as I want to leave them in peace. I want them to be happy so much that I'm very tempted to just give them what they wanted or what they asked. But I know that that's not my job. I know that the job that we came here, and they're the other members in the first triangle. I know that I'm the first one to awaken in that group. And we created a sequence of events. We knew that I was going to be the first one to be the catalyst. We knew that was going to happen. We designed a sequence of events. So knowing that that's my job, my primary allegiance is to the soul agreement that I know for a fact that we've got. And it's important to defer, to listen. If you have a choice, defer to the soul's choice and not the personal preference. That goes for me too. Like, that's another thing. I had to flip that around. If my position was reversed, does my person, which one am I going to prioritize? Am I going to prioritize what I know is true for my soul, or am I going to prioritize and put more energy, give more energetic weight to what my lower personality would prefer because it's a lot easier? My job is to make the highest choice for all concerned, and that means following the soul's choice, or following the soul guidance. And if you head toward the North Star, if you make the higher choice every single time, you will gradually take yourself out of darkness and pull others up with you, which is how I'm eventually going, provided they agree, I will eventually get out my entire family if we've stayed connected. But it's their decision and not mine. You can only influence the sleepers by virtue of vibrational drift. So I'm not going to go to them and try to convince them to agree with me. I'm simply going to go and do what I do and maintain my love for them, maintain my connection to them energetically. And if they have any way out, it's going to be through me. So that's not through me necessarily, but through the energetic tie, because I anchored us there. And that was the soul contract, which I know. And I'm not going to pretend that I don't know it, no matter how much it annoys the crap out of you on a personal level. And that's part of being a good parent too. Sometimes your kid wants something that is dangerous, and you have to say no because you have to say no. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you're being a wise steward as soon as it's safe, but you also don't want to keep them in captivity. Like, the ultimate goal of raising children is to have them be productive adults who can themselves make wise decisions and raise children of their own. But it's not necessarily to maintain the control structure. You maintain it as long as it's productive and producing growth. If it's not producing growth, you're stewed. I was going to talk about addictions. How are we doing on time? I was going to talk about addictions. So this is in the lower strata is where things are very locked and very difficult to change. So remember I said how everything in here moves and moves and moves. We established a rotation. There's a deliberate rotation, and everything that spirals has energetic acceleration. That's the way I wanted to say it. It's replicative. It's designed to build and gather more the more times it spirals. So if there's a spiral, the light spiral, if something is pointed, I need a different diagram. If something is pointed, if something starts here, wait a minute. How am I going to say this? I want a different thing. This is where there's no movement. In density, in the point of the triangle where everything is individuated and everything is into matter, carbon-based matter has been, even if it's not carbon-based, this is where there's less movement. And this is the third dimension where there's very little movement, everything is linear. The fourth dimension is where there's more movement. Things pop in and out of form because it's semi-solid. In the fifth dimension and higher is where you get a different kind of structure where things move faster and it's circular. Down here, it's linear. So it's much more masculine. It's masculine down here. I need a different diagram. Think of the blade. If this is the, if that's the blade and that's the chalice, this is where it's much more linear and denser and harder to move. So the chalice is the feminine portion of the triangle, and it's circular. Everything in the higher dimensions, like the quantum field, everything moves very quickly. It rotates. At some point, I'm going to use the card game Spitit to talk about synchronicities and basically we're talking about the quantum field, and it's in constant motion. That doesn't mean it's less secure. That means it's viewed as being unstable. Well, it is unstable, but it doesn't mean it's less secure. It's actually far more secure. You're held in a different way. You're held much more like water will hold you, but it's also infinitely flexible. But it doesn't break the way, it doesn't bind you. It's very freeing. It's actually quite a bit like water in a way. Where was I going with this? In higher dimensions, things are circular. So that's why, like, even spirit communication is circular, where like one image can mean a number of different things. It doesn't have just one meaning. It has you see things kind of holistically in a comprehensive way, and you can also pass whole bodies of knowledge very fluidly, where you just transmit something and you send downloads to people, as opposed to a linear form of communication, which would be, you know, words that go in a sentence, and it has a beginning and an end with words in the middle, and it's a limited way of speaking compared to a quantum way of speaking, which is delivering something en masse, and to a linear mind, or to someone who is accustomed to functioning down here, it's going to seem like a jumble of information, and how do you know which is which? Because they're looking for something to be specific. But it's actually quite a bit more benevolent, quite a bit more loving. There are different requirements of the third dimension, in the fifth dimension. In the third dimension, someone in the fifth dimension who's looking, basically we have kind of an overview. So it's kind of like being responsible for, let's say, acreage. Let's say if you have a huge estate, you might manage the entire estate, but you don't pay attention to the number. You don't have to count your blades of grass. You own the acreage, or you are a wise steward of the acreage and all the things on it, but you don't micromanage to the point where you're counting the grains of sand. But it's so interesting though, because that doesn't mean that job doesn't get done. You know, like God's eye is on the sparrow, that's true. There's just a mechanism by which it happens. And there's a way that we learn to be wise stewards of others, and there's spiritual curriculum too. This is a very interesting thing. When you're in the third dimension, you have the experience of being an individual, and your first job is to learn to manage yourself, and then you learn to manage other individuals and care for another person as yourself. You know, you'll learn to care for your children or your immediate family members, but it's something that's revolving around you. There's training in being a deity too. There's training in being a spirit guide. When we have personalized spirit guides, that's a form of spiritual training. When you leave your body and you hang out in, like when you're an ancestor or if you're a spirit and you're hanging out in the fourth dimension and trying to get messages, you know, like via mediums or someone to like get messages to your family members or something. Let's say that if I die tomorrow and I want to go visit my other family members, or I could use a medium or something like that. I could appear in a dream, but I could be a spirit guide. Like that's one of the things that's an option. If you want to experience something, sometimes as part of our training in being a steward of others outside of a body, because you can care for others when you're in a body. You can also be outside of a physical vessel and hang out in the fourth dimension and be a spirit guide for somebody who's down there, and then you'll learn how hard it is to get them to actually pay attention. It's hard sometimes. You think you do everything right, and you set things up for them to find and fall over, and you put images in their dreams, and you're like, oh my God, how can they say that it's hidden in plain sight? It's just plain in plain sight. We're doing everything we could possibly think of. We're sending you animal totems and knocking on your door and leaving you pennies and feathers and putting songs in your head and granted, the dark side has been largely trying to keep you asleep, but it works both directions. So what I started to say before is, if you're someone who's just beginning to, if you're really awakening, and let's say you've awakened to the point where you're aware that the conspiracy theories were not theories, and you're aware, you read David Icke and you follow collective evolution, and you've learned about the secret space program, and you listen to David Wilcock and or whoever, and you know about reptilians, and you listen to me or whatever you do, you're awakening. Be careful now. It takes you into a new strata. As you go up, and things get clearer and clearer for you, you have to change tactics as you go up. Because if you continue, for one thing, as you go up in strata, the things that come out of your mouth are more and more instantly generative, and you have an effect on more and more people. So you're going to have to change your tactic immediately to be way more positive and no more hiding. Like you're going to get the world that you live in. So you can't say, I'm not going to tell my family members what I know, because then you're endorsing with your energetic signature, you're endorsing deception. Whatever the hell you allow is what you allow in your world. I cannot stress this strongly enough. If you allow deception, if you're agreeing that people can have a facade so that nobody sees what they really think. Nobody sees what I really think. I keep certain things a secret, and secrecy is okay in my world. Well, then you cannot say that other people have to disclose their secrets. How much do you actually want disclosure in the world? If you actually want disclosure in the world on a mass scale, I do. I value transparency, but I would be very hypocritical if I valued transparency, but I didn't come out as being Joan of Arc. I had to come to grips with that wherever it led. Is it through a swamp of trauma? Yeah. It was awful. I didn't want the attention. I didn't want any ramifications. I didn't want the accountability. I didn't want any more eyes on me, because my whole thing is that I really, 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 really don't want to be that figure anymore. I really want to push it away and get everybody to take back their own power. And as soon as people, the risk is, I shouldn't say it's automatically a given, but there's a risk, a real risk, that when people, I'm not afraid of danger, number one. I view bodies as being, I shouldn't, it's my own deficit. I view bodies as being more or less disposable. And I'm not a huge fan of the physical vessels or this one. I would really like to, I just want a new one. If I have to be in one at all, I want a new one. But there's also a risk that people can make your life miserable. I'm not afraid of people not taking me seriously. There's that. When people think that you know, she's crazy. If they call me crazy, it's actually, in my mind anyway, it's kind of a safer place to be. They usually, although I've suffered that way too, usually when people call you crazy, they dismiss you and they don't bother you. They more or less, they'll leave you alone because they think you're crazy, so that you're free to kind of go about your business. You get less interference. When people start to take you seriously, like, oh my God, she really was Joan of Arc. When people take you seriously, there's much more of a big spotlight on you. And all of a sudden you have to deal with that energetic interference. All of a sudden there's people who automatically don't like you. So the people who let you live your life and left you alone before are now suddenly all over you. And they have expectations. They, you know, cancel. Maybe they won't. Maybe it will. I'm open to something different happening this time. But I've also been aware that my role this time, in this lifetime, is tricky. It has to go in two directions simultaneously. Because on one hand, I had to, in order to get through the 11 gateway myself anyway, I had to deal with my own trauma, because you can't take fear and regret and anger and, you know, victimization or whatever, regret, sorrow, anguish. You can't take all that stuff someplace where it doesn't exist. So if I still carry it in my field since I was her, or that was actually me, I had to purge that too. I had to integrate. That's the word I wanted. I had to integrate my dark side. So it was no small task. So I had to take it back and transmute all of that darkness into a comprehensive whole. So that's what's taken me some time, because it was a lot. I'm also in an energetic construct with the initial layer of this is not 6, but 3. There are 2 other beings on either corner. So there was that. Yeah. Where was I going with this? Hang on a second. So I felt as though we were going in 2 directions, because we are. Hang on a minute. But it's a difficult task this time, because on one hand, in order to do my job, I had to first be integrated, and then I had to take the spotlight enough so that my message could be received in order to transmit it back outward. You have to hold it in order, but it has to go back out. Like, I really am interested in having it go back out. But so if I take the spotlight and more people are looking on me, that's kind of giving me back. Anyway, it's going in two directions. So this is interesting though. You're going to get whatever it is that you put in. So the people that gave me their power are going to get their power back. And whatever power I took from them, and by power I mean energy, I transmuted a lot of it. I hope that they're getting something. Like I transmute for the collective. Like the stuff that's transmutable is the stuff that's shared. The stuff that's personal, it belongs to that individual to do, and I can't touch that. That's why if somebody closes on, if any number of the beings in this construct, when all of this stuff is sent back through or re-delivered, it starts to go back out. People take their power through whatever they put into the construct, they're getting back out. It's going to be whatever, boy, I'm explaining this badly. It's going to go out through whatever the exit is. So if the dark beings, if that's what they added, if they brought this amount of darkness to the table and it wasn't transmuted, if they didn't agree to have it transmuted, or it basically, it's going to come back to them. So if you were somebody, like this happened, as an example, there was one person who was in the construct for a while who was really incredibly negative. And I was working, doing tens of thousands of Ho'oponoponos and saying my prayers and lighting my candles, and I was just frantically clearing very much for about 3 or 4 years, very heavily into basically even the Joan persona, because I had to purge it, I had to clear it. And in order to clear it, you can't clear it by suppressing it, you have to clear it by being it. And basically, it's like vomit, it's like soul vomit, except your soul's never really sick. But whatever you contained, you're gonna it's gonna be the same when it goes out as it was when you swallowed it. So I was clearing not only for myself, but I was clearing for the collective, and I was clearing for all of this stuff for the collective and the interior. And since I was so committed to clearing it, very, very driven, and there was a ton of energy in this construct, I was clearing all the time. In my sleep, I was just spending, 10 hours a day. That's not an exaggeration. I was spending 10 hours a day, prayer and meditation, and on my rosary bead and my mala, I was pacing and saying my prayers, and I had candles on different altars all over the house, and it was really, really intense, because that's the work that needed to get done. My business partner on the other side was probably one of the most negative people I've ever met in my life, and said that she wanted to go in one direction, but was verbalizing negativity all the time. There are just certain behaviors where, so on one hand, you might say under certain conditions that could be considered a purge. When you're that, if you're purging it with the intent, or if you're being negative in the process of clearing, it's like lancing an abscess. It's like there's going to be a point in the lower levels where, in order to clear this out, it's going to have to come up. And there's a certain strata where it's not really creating, because it's not a creative space, right? Fortunately, it's less creative than it is responsive. So when it comes up, you have to release it and change your behavior. So there was a point where there were other members of the construct who were actively still contributing darkness, and they were putting darkness in as fast as I could clear it. So nothing was changing. That's one thing that was happening for a really long time. And it felt like I was working for no reason. Is that going to ultimately tell? Yeah, because basically when all of this, we have a certain window of time where all of this clearing is taking place. And all of this clearing is taking place, and whatever she added, she's going to get back. If she went and, so she's been, I don't know, I haven't seen her in about a year. So, and she's no longer my business partner. So if she used her time in isolation to do a lot of her own emotional clearing process and go through her own shit, then it's possible that she's moved up and is now much clearer. I don't know. I haven't talked to her. But whatever you put out and have not resolved, if you haven't done your own crap clearing, then then you're going to get that. Then you haven't cleared it. Then it's going to be as dark as it was. I was going to talk about addictions. The way, so this level, because it's lighter, moves a lot. It has freedom to move faster, so it moves a lot faster. Things move a lot slower when the denser they are. They get way, 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 way slower and fixed. So like very stubborn energy is down here. It doesn't like to move, and it's very negative, and things get stuck down here. So everything that is in here, if this is where the rotation was taking place, there is a rotational aspect. Remember I said, like, we share skill sets. So there's a rotation that, and spirals amplify, right? So if, to change diagrams, if there's a rotation happening in here in the middle region, and something is going to be met by, like this person brings whatever they are to the table, and it's going to be experienced by this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. Every last person is going to get some version of whatever this person, as a measure, as a way of developing empathy. You're going to experience some version of whatever this person went through. That's one reason you want to treat everybody in your group really well, whether you like them or not. Whether you like them or not. Eventually, whatever you do to any person in this, to any person, it's eventually going to come around to you in the matrix. Yes, it is. That's the third dimension, is the realm of karma. You're going to get back whatever you put out. So make sure that it's something that's good. Make sure it's something noble. Make sure it's something that has integrity, and make sure that that you're fully prepared to live through whatever it is you inflicted on someone else. Check your responses. But it's going to take a certain form. It's going to be experienced through, so everybody sees their world through their own lens. So you bring yourself to the collective table, but you kind of have your own take on it. Like every person is their own color. It's their own recipe. You're going to see it through your own lens. So regarding this rotational spiraling aspect, if you are in, I do wish I had a different diagram. If the spiraling aspect takes place in here, and when it's met by this person who is mostly light and pointed up, there's a spiraling aspect, and it's met by this person who is mostly a light being and pointed up, devoted to service toward others. That's what happens when you point up into a higher dimension. You're serving others in a spiral, and you're directed out. What's going to happen is the spiral aspect of this is going to go toward others. It's going to be that's why I said my energy is extremely generative. Everything it touches, it's going to spin out. So if you are a benevolent being, you go and you bless this person, and those blessings continue. This is one reason that the higher vibrational abundance system is way more stable. And you don't have things like stock market crashes because it's not in self-service. You are automatically going to get fed because there is that much benevolence, and you're surrounded by everybody else who's also in this triangle, and we all feed one another. And as soon as there's a vacancy, you can, everybody around you, there's the only competition there is, if there's competition at all, is a competition to do it. Oh, I'd love to do it. There's almost this, up here, there's almost this compulsive, near compulsive contribution. You see a vacancy and it's like water. It's like it's automatically filled. And there's so much love that as soon as you see a vacancy and you're like, oh, great. I love that, because now is my opportunity to go in and help. And as soon as you don't mind giving, because that's going to create a vacancy in you, and you're going to get more light and more sharing. And it's just all distribution all the time. It's all flow all the time. It's all love all the time. That's why, as an abundance model, it works. There is no starvation. There is wealth. There's just an abundance of wealth, and it spirals off in all directions. It's extremely generative. So what happens on the other model? If you take a spiral and you put it towards self-service and density, you cater to your lower aspect, and you do what's easier. It might take less energy, because there's something that's darkness will take the same thing, but it will apply it differently, and it will feed. It will see it will pick its own viewpoint. A dark viewpoint, a dark lens, will say, it will be like a different kind of spiral that takes you down into a pit towards self, instead of going up toward others, where it's serving others and gaining in momentum and spiraling and serving everybody. In a network, it's going to go into self-service, and it's going to become almost invariably an addiction. It's going to be turned into a suction, is what it's going to be, and it's going to become almost impossible to get out. This is how the matrix itself is a trap for the darkness. So one thing you can do, if you're awakened enough that you're awakened to the fact that a matrix exists. You're like, my God, the Matrix was a documentary. Okay, now that you're awake, really quick, pick your aim. Pick your aim. Because if you then, from the position of being awakened, you have to pick a side and say, am I going to distribute this information, wear it and turn it toward the light, and distribute this information and broaden it, and be part of the distribution network, be part of the clarity, be part of the giving, be part of the awakening? Or am I going to keep it to myself and don't tell my family members because they wouldn't understand, and I'm in fear that someone's not going to get it. Someone's not going to like it. Somebody might not like me. I might get rejected, so I'm not going to say anything, and congratulations, you just took yourself back into it. And that way, you're basically buying into a torture system. But then that's the thing. Like, if you start to verbalize victimization, the Matrix is just here to trap us. Yeah, it's here to trap you, but you can't pull on just one side of a rubber band. If it's here to trap you, it's also here to liberate you over here. It's also here to keep those who are not going to be wise stewards of others. If they're not inclined to go up, if they are in self-service, then they're going to be trapped by addiction, by spirals of negative thinking. So just be really careful. If the Matrix is a trap to you, it's because you trapped yourself in the Matrix by viewing it as a trap. If you view it also, if you really have clarity about it, you're going to understand that it's also a sacred choice point. That's what the Matrix is. It's a network. It's a framework for awakening. And it's going to provide you, if you utilize it properly, it can provide you with a sacred choice point. If you're one of the people who has gone up and up and up, and even if maybe you're liberating others, that's the 11 gateway. Then if you're committed, really committed on a personal level to going up as far as you can go and disseminating your information, not from a place of infliction, but from a place of liberating yourself and just freeing yourself from a control system. It's so interesting that those who are in the third dimension, they're very, very focused on control, and they're very focused on the fact that others, they try to control everything, though. That's the interesting thing, but they have relatively little control. The interesting thing in the higher dimensions is that we don't control others. We control others, but we don't take control over others. The actual goal is to give everybody control over themselves and wield control as little as possible. The goal is to have everybody else manage themselves. There is actually a there's a self-sorting system, that kind of being the entire point. What else was I going to say? Well, how am I doing on time? I've got about, it's 3:04. Okay. I feel like there was something else I was going to say. Yeah. All right. All right. I'm gonna end this live stream here. Okay. I love you all. Oh, please do me a favor. If you are right now, I had cancel any negative effects of this. I know that we're going to break through to a much more abundant system. It actually is imminent. Like, I know it's coming. In the moment, I have less than $5. I have been actually quite significantly targeted by dark forces. They know what's about to break through. I talk to people about this all the time. If you're in the position to make any kind of a financial contribution, I would be enormously grateful. I'd be enormously grateful. I literally have not even $5 right now. I borrowed $5. I don't even have, I think I have 50, it was like 45 cents or something like that in my bank account. Any contributions, I would appreciate it greatly. Yeah, watch the space. If you can subscribe and share my YouTube channel, it's The Ascension Arc on YouTube. I'm trying to get subscribers. Yeah, okay. Like, share, and subscribe. I love you. If you want my PayPal address, I can't remember the address, but I'm going to put the link on my wall. If you're in the position where you can make any kind of contribution, that'd be good. Okay. I love you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.